Breakfast used to be the loudest meal in the house, and then one morning it just went quiet. The griddle cooled off, the biscuit pan stayed in the cabinet, and the woman who had everything on the table before the sun came up was gone. Nobody wrote down what she made. They were not fancy meals. Fried cornmeal mush reheated in the skillet with bacon grease. Cold buttermilk poured over crumbled cornbread in a tall glass. Eggs scrambled with whatever the garden had that week, on a plate that had been in the family longer than the house. Some of them disappeared because the ingredients stopped being cheap. Some vanished because the person who made them passed away and the recipe went with them. And a few were pushed out by cereal boxes, frozen waffles, and a kitchen that decided it did not need a stove anymore. 100 forgotten breakfasts that vanished from the family table all the way through.
Number 19, oxtail hash, leftover oxtails. From the night before, the meat pulled off the bone in dark shreds and fried in a skillet with diced onion and whatever potato was in the house. Oxtails were poor people's meat. The tail of the cow, full of bone and connective tissue, sold for almost nothing because the butcher could not move it to anyone who had a choice. Black families bought them by the pound and simmered them until the collagen dissolved and the meat fell apart. At breakfast, the leftover meat went into the skillet and became hash. Oxtails are now one of the most expensive cuts at the butcher counter, priced beyond the reach of the families who made them worth eating. But the nutrition was always there. The long, slow cooking extracts, gelatin, calcium, and magnesium from the bones and connective tissue directly into the meat and broth. The dark meat around the tail is rich in iron, zinc, and B vitamins, more concentrated than a loin or a rib because the muscle worked constantly during the animal's life. A plate of oxtail hash with a fried egg on top delivered more bioavailable minerals than a handful of supplement capsules. The potatoes absorbed the rendered fat and the pan juices, turning a leftover into a meal that held steady through a morning of work. Doctors saw a plate of fatty red meat and starch and warned against it. What they were looking at was a collagen-rich, mineral-dense recovery meal that modern sports nutritionists would recognize immediately, served 50 years early by women who never read a research paper but understood what a body needed after a hard day and before the next one started. The price of oxtails tells the whole story. What cost pennies a pound in the 1960s now commands premium prices. The food that doctors shamed became the food that food writers celebrated, and the families who ate it first got priced out of their own tradition. The nutrition never changed. Only the name on the customer did.
Field pea breakfast stew transformed humble peas into a nourishing start to the day. Fresh or dried field peas were simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and a smoked ham hock until the broth turned rich and flavorful. Served over hot rice, the stew delivered protein and warmth that fueled hours of labor. Families valued it as a way to stretch ingredients while creating a meal that felt hearty and complete. Grandparents remember waking to the scent of peas simmering on the stove, a steady reminder that breakfast was already underway before dawn. The dish brought together garden harvests and cured meat, reflecting a tradition of combining what was fresh with what had been carefully preserved. It was a breakfast that filled bellies and lifted spirits, offering comfort in every spoonful. Today, field pea breakfast stew stands as a delicious tribute to the patience and skill of those who cooked with care and shared their tables with love. Fried catfish and cornbread was a breakfast plate that reflected the abundance of rivers and the skill of African American cooks in the South. Catfish could be caught at little cost, cleaned, coated in cornmeal, and fried crisp in cast-iron skillets. Paired with hot cornbread fresh from the oven, the meal was both hearty and nourishing. It gave workers the energy needed for long days in the fields, and children the strength to get through school without hunger. Families often made it on weekends when fishing provided enough to share with neighbors, turning it into a communal meal. The taste was bold and rustic, with a combination of crunchy fish and soft bread that defined comfort. Though fish is not often associated with breakfast today, fried catfish and cornbread once stood proudly on morning tables. It remains a reflection of resilience and resourcefulness, showing how nature and tradition came together to sustain communities.
Number 18, sugar bread. A slice of white bread, a smear of butter or margarine, a heavy sprinkle of sugar. That was it. A mother folded the bread in half so the sugar would not fall out and handed it to a child on the way out the door. A loaf cost 21 cents. Sugar cost a dime. Margarine was 25 cents a pound, less than a dime per serving. This was not nutrition. This was a promise. A mother saying, "I could not give you eggs this morning, but I can give you something sweet enough to make you forget that." In black neighborhoods of Memphis, Detroit, and Chicago, sugar bread was the breakfast of the Great Migration. Families who had moved north for factory jobs still ate it on payday mornings, long after they could afford something better, because some foods passed down through hard times carry more than calories. They carry the memory of when you could not afford anything else. Here is something that does not get said enough. The women who made these breakfasts were not cooking. They were engineering. They had a budget that was fixed, miles that were not, and a clock that gave them 20 minutes between waking up and getting a child out the door. Every ingredient had to justify its place. Every penny had to stretch. Every plate had to look full enough that a child did not go to school feeling poor. These were not recipes born from creativity. They were born from mathematics in kitchens that were too hot in summer and too cold in winter, by women who had already been awake for an hour doing someone else's laundry. The breakfasts on this list are not nostalgia. They are evidence that black women in the 1960s fed families on budgets that should not have been survivable. Number 18, Strico lean and red-eye gravy. Few breakfasts spoke louder about black Southern survival than a thin slice of Strico lean with a pour of red-eye gravy on top. Strico lean was the cheap cousin of bacon, a piece of side meat with stripes of pink running through the fat. It cost half what bacon cost in 1965, sometimes only 15 cents a pound at a country store. 2 slices went into a hot pan and curled up tight as they crisped, leaving a thin layer of brown drippings stuck to the bottom. A half cup of strong black coffee poured straight into that hot pan, and the brown bits lifted off the iron in seconds. That dark, salty pour was the red-eye gravy. It went over a split biscuit or a wedge of cornbread, and the streak of lean sat right on top. The flavor was bigger than the price, and most older folks today still remember the smell of coffee hitting that pan first thing in the morning. For many of us, that one pour of red-eye gravy is the closest thing our grandmothers ever left behind to a written recipe. Grits with butter, before cheese grits, before shrimp and grits, before any chef in any city put a $20 price tag on a bowl of corn, there was this, just grits, just butter. A woman in Birmingham, Alabama would boil water, pour in stone ground grits, stir them slowly for 30 minutes, and finish them with a generous pat of butter, salt, and black pepper. She served them in a bowl, and the butter melted into a yellow pool in the center. That pool was the best part. You mixed it in slowly with your spoon, and every bite tasted like warm, creamy, salted corn. 3/4 of all the grits sold in this country are sold in the South in what people call the grits belt. Georgia declared grits its official prepared food in 2002, but none of that marketing existed in the 1950s. Grits were not a brand. They were not a trend. They were what you ate every single morning because a bag of grits cost almost nothing and fed your whole family for a week. That simplicity was the whole point. That was the beauty of it. Number one,
Salmon croquettes with grits turned pantry staples into a breakfast feast that felt both luxurious and familiar across African American communities of the 1970s. Canned salmon was flaked into a bowl with onions, breadcrumbs, and a little seasoning, then shaped into neat patties ready for the skillet. As they fried, the croquettes developed a crisp golden crust while staying moist inside, their aroma mingling with the gentle steam of creamy stone-ground grits bubbling nearby. This pairing brought together the coastal traditions of the South and the practicality of modern kitchens, where canned fish kept well and stretched to feed a family. Some cooks added a squeeze of lemon or a pinch of cayenne for extra brightness and heat, while others folded in fresh herbs from backyard gardens. Served with a side of sliced tomatoes or greens, salmon croquettes with grits delivered protein, comfort, and a taste of heritage, showing how everyday ingredients could be elevated into a soulful breakfast worth savoring.
Before bacon became the standard, black kitchens in the 1950s ran on streak of lean, that salt-cured strip of pork belly with just enough meat running through the fat to give it flavor. It cost half what bacon did and lasted twice as long in the icebox. You sliced it thin, dropped it in a dry skillet, and let the fat render slow until the edges went dark and crisp. The grease that pooled was never wasted. Eggs went straight into that same fat, whites bubbling and browning while the yolk stayed soft. The trick was heat. You had to know when the grease was talking, not screaming. Too hot and the eggs turned rubbery. Too cool and the streak meat stayed limp. Your mother knew by sound alone. She never looked at a thermometer. That slab of salted pork carried more black households through Monday mornings than any cookbook will ever record. Some mornings, there was nothing left. No eggs, no meat, no grits in the tin.
Pork neck bone and rice turned a humble cut into a deeply flavored breakfast that spoke to generations of resourceful cooking. Meaty pork neck bones were simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and bay leaves until their rich broth infused every grain of rice. The long cooking released tenderness and flavor, transforming inexpensive ingredients into a dish that tasted luxurious. Families often added a pinch of red pepper or a splash of vinegar for brightness, while some stirred in greens for added nourishment. Served steaming hot, pork neck bone and rice offered hearty protein and comforting warmth that fueled long workdays. This meal reflected the African American tradition of using every part of the animal with skill and respect, proving that nothing needed to be wasted to create something memorable. Pork neck bone and rice stood as both sustenance and celebration, a bowl of savory history that reminded everyone at the table of the creativity and strength passed down through kitchens across the South and beyond. Fried bologna biscuits were the kind of breakfast that made you feel like you were getting something special even when money was tight. Grandparents would slice thick rounds of bologna and lay them into a popping skillet, letting the edges curl and brown until the flavor deepened into something smoky and rich. The hot slices were tucked into fresh biscuits, often homemade or leftover from the night before, absorbing just enough of the bologna's warmth to soften perfectly. It was salty, savory, and incredibly satisfying, the kind of handheld breakfast that felt almost luxurious despite coming from inexpensive ingredients. Children loved the way the biscuit crumbled slightly with each bite, mixing with the bold taste of the fried bologna. Adults appreciated how easy it was to make and how far it could stretch the budget. This was the kind of food that reminded families that good meals did not need fancy ingredients or long cooking times. All they needed was a skillet, some biscuits, and someone who knew how to make simple food feel unforgettable. Sorghum porridge was the kind of breakfast that filled both stomach and soul. Made from cornmeal slowly cooked in water or milk, it thickened into a smooth, golden base. Then came the sorghum, dark, sticky, and sweet, poured in thick ribbons that turned the porridge into comfort in a bowl. It had a deep flavor, richer than sugar, with the faint taste of smoke and earth. This was the kind of meal that warmed you from the inside out, especially on cold mornings when the fire had not yet chased away the chill. Mothers stirred it with wooden spoons, tasting as they went, knowing exactly when it was done, Children waited with spoons in hand, eager for the first bite. It was not fancy, but it was honest, full of energy for the long day ahead. Sorghum porridge taught patience, both in the making and in the eating. It was thick, hearty, and a little sweet, the kind of meal that made hard work possible and hunger distant. Every spoonful carried the memory of homegrown syrup and the rhythm of early mornings shared in quiet kitchens. Leftover rice fried with eggs and onions was the taste of ingenuity, proof that nothing good ever went to waste. A pot of yesterday's rice, once plain and forgotten, became golden and flavorful with just a few simple touches. In a skillet slicked with grease, onions browned until sweet and fragrant before the rice was tossed in, sizzling as it hit the heat. Beaten eggs followed, binding everything together in a warm, savory tangle. Sometimes a scrap of meat joined the mix, a bit of ham, bacon, or sausage, turning the dish into something rich and filling. The smell of it cooking was comfort itself, the kind of scent that woke up sleepy eyes and lifted tired hearts. It was breakfast for working families, quick and hearty, ready in minutes. Mothers called it stretching what you had, but to children it was simply delicious. Every forkful tasted like resourcefulness and home, a small triumph born from yesterday's leftovers and today's love. Ham hocks and grits were the taste of strength, the kind of breakfast that gave purpose to long southern mornings. The hocks, salted and smoked to perfection, simmered for hours until their meat softened and the broth turned deep and rich. That liquid gold was poured beside steaming bowls of grits, stirred smooth with butter and a pinch of salt. Together, they created a meal that was simple, soulful, and sustaining, the very essence of working-class pride. The smoky aroma filled kitchens, mingling with the hum of conversation and the rattle of spoons in enamel bowls. Every bite carried the story of patience, of making the most out of little, and of turning scarcity into satisfaction. It was food meant to last, to fuel bodies that toiled in fields or factories. Paired with black coffee, it became a ritual, strong, grounded, and unwavering. Ham hocks and grits were not delicate, but they were honest. They represented endurance, flavor born from necessity, and comfort earned the hard way. The meal was slow to make but quick to disappear, leaving behind full bellies and grateful hearts. It was proof that real nourishment came not from wealth, but from wisdom passed through hands and time. Red gravy with rice was a breakfast dish that combined economy with comfort in African American households. The gravy was made from tomatoes, onions, and seasoning, simmered until thick and poured over steaming rice. It was filling, affordable, and deeply satisfying, providing warmth and energy to carry through the day. For many families, rice was cheaper than bread and could be stretched to feed everyone, while tomatoes added both flavor and color. The dish was common across the South, where it became a daily staple for working people who needed hearty food before long hours of labor. Children often grew up with it as a familiar morning ritual, while adults valued its reliability and ease of preparation. Red gravy with rice was never fancy, but it symbolized resilience and the ability to make simple ingredients carry meaning. Though rarely served in breakfast form today, it was once a proud and practical tradition.
Number 21, fried catfish at breakfast. In the Delta, catfish was not a dinner food. It was whatever meal you needed food, caught fresh from a pond or a creek, dredged in cornmeal, and fried in a skillet before the house was fully awake. Fried food became the enemy in every nutrition pamphlet printed after 1980. Frying meant fat, fat meant heart disease, and the conversation ended there. Nobody asked what kind of fat. Nobody asked what was being fried. Catfish is lean, high in protein, and a natural source of vitamin D, something that is chronically low in Black Americans. The cornmeal crust added whole grain. The frying medium, when it was lard or bacon drippings, was stable at high heat and did not oxidize the way the vegetable oils that replaced it often do.
Buttermilk hoe cakes were thin golden cornmeal pancakes that turned an everyday staple into a morning delight. A batter of cornmeal, buttermilk, and a little melted butter was poured onto a hot cast-iron griddle where it spread into crisp-edged rounds. The cakes cooked quickly, developing a toasty aroma that filled the kitchen and tempted everyone to grab one straight from the pan. Served with honey, cane syrup, or a pat of fresh butter, they offered a satisfying balance of tangy buttermilk and sweet corn. Families loved them because they were inexpensive, fast, and endlessly versatile, equally good with fried eggs or a bowl of stewed fruit. Grandparents recall how hoe cakes were often cooked outdoors on flat hoes or griddles over open fires during harvest seasons, a practical method that gave the cakes their name. Each bite carried the taste of tradition and the resourcefulness of cooks who knew how to turn simple ingredients into a breakfast worth remembering. Cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup was a staple breakfast that reflected the creativity and resilience of African American kitchens in the South and beyond. The mush itself was simple, made from cornmeal cooked slowly with water or milk until it thickened into a smooth porridge that filled bowls generously. On its own, it was filling but plain, so families would drizzle sorghum syrup over the top to add sweetness and richness without needing expensive sugar. Sorghum was cheaper, widely available in the South, and deeply tied to farm life, making it a household staple for generations of working families. This dish was eaten hot at the table with spoons, sometimes with butter or milk added, or cooled in pans and sliced to be fried later as griddle cakes. For children, it was a comfort food that brought both energy and warmth on school mornings when bellies needed to be full. For adults, it was a dependable way to stretch limited supplies into a hearty start to the day, ensuring no one went hungry. Cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup was never fancy, but it was practical, satisfying, and deeply tied to the rhythm of working life.
Number 22, sweet potato pone. Not a pie and not a casserole. Something in between with no modern equivalent. You grated raw sweet potatoes until your knuckles ached, mixed the pulp with molasses, buttermilk, cinnamon, and lard, then poured it into a greased pan and baked it low and slow until the top turned dark and caramelized. The texture was dense and chewy, almost like pudding that decided to become bread. Sweet potatoes were the cheapest vegetable in the 1960s South. A bushel cost less than $1 at roadside stands. Grandmothers who grew their own paid nothing. They baked pone in the evening when the oven was already hot from supper, wrapped it in cloth, and set it on the counter for morning. A slice with coffee was a full breakfast, sweet enough to feel like a treat, substantial enough to carry a person through 4 hours of work. Number 24, one slab of fatback, 7 mornings. A single piece of fatback could feed a whole household for a week, and grandmothers in Mississippi and Alabama knew exactly how to make it last. They would buy one thick slab on Saturday for around 20 cents a pound, then score it across the top with a paring knife so the salt would render down slow. Monday morning, 2 slices went into the cold skillet. Those slices crisped up and gave back nearly a cup of clear, golden grease that flavored everything else that hit the pan that week. The skillet never got washed. The leftover grease became the cooking fat for Tuesday's eggs, Wednesday's grits, Thursday's potatoes, and Friday's hoe cakes. By Sunday, the original slab was almost gone, but the flavor had touched every plate that came through the kitchen. One pig and a careful hand could carry a family from one paycheck to the next, and almost no one threw away the brown bits stuck to the bottom of the pan. Number 12, smoked sausage and grits. Before the fancy shrimp and grits that restaurants charge $18 for, there was this. A woman in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, would slice smoked sausage into thick coins, fry them in a skillet until the edges curled and browned, then serve them over a bowl of creamy grits with the rendered fat poured right on top. The sausage cost about 40 cents a link in the 1950s. The grits cost even less. One link of sausage sliced across could top 4 bowls of grits. That was 4 breakfasts for under $1. This was engineering. Think about What the food industry did to this meal, they took the grits and put them in a single-serve instant packet. They took the sausage and turned it into a frozen patty wrapped in plastic. They separated the ingredients, processed them, and sold each one back to you at 3 times the price. But in the 1950s, a black grandmother in Louisiana did not need the food industry. She needed a pot, a skillet, and 10 minutes. She could feed her family a hot breakfast every morning of the week for less than the cost of 1 box of cereal. That math was not accidental. That was how she kept everyone alive, and the meal was better than anything you could buy in a package because it was made in a kitchen that smelled like smoke and butter and someone who knew your name. Number 7, hog jowl and eggs. The jowl was the cheek of the hog, cured in salt and smoke the same way ham was cured, but fattier, chewier, and stronger in flavor. Sliced thick and fried in a cast iron skillet over medium heat, it rendered out enough grease to cook everything else that morning. The slices came out with crispy edges and a soft, meaty center that tasted like bacon crossed with ham, only deeper and more complex. The eggs went into the same pan, into the jowl grease, and came out with a flavor that plain butter could never give them. The whites picked up the smoke, the yolks turned richer from the fat. A plate of hog jowl and eggs was simple in appearance, but layered in taste, because every element on the plate had been seasoned by the same piece of meat. Hog jowl was a cut that cost almost nothing because most shoppers did not want it. The cheek of the hog was considered scrap by anyone who had not grown up eating it. A grandmother knew better. She knew the jowl carried more flavor per pound than most cuts in the case, and she knew that the grease it left behind was currency in a kitchen where nothing went unused. On New Year's Day, hog jowl showed up alongside black-eyed peas for luck. But on a regular Saturday morning, it showed up because it was good, because it was cheap, and because a woman who had been cooking for decades knew exactly what that skillet needed. Smoked herring arrived, wrapped in brown paper from the corner store, stiff and salty and smelling like the ocean had been set on fire. Your grandmother soaked it overnight to pull the salt out, then flaked the flesh off the bones and warmed it in a skillet with butter. Served over hot grits, the herring melted into the corn and turned the plate smoky and rich. Along the Chesapeake Bay and through the Gullah Geechee coast, salt-cured fish had been a breakfast staple since before the 1940s, carried inland by families who migrated but never lost their taste for the sea. Herring was cheap and kept without refrigeration. The bones were the test. If you picked them clean, without complaint, you earned your place at the table. She did it with her eyes half closed, pulling each thin bone by feel, her fingers remembering a motion her mind no longer had to guide. When she stopped cooking, nobody bothered to soak the fish. The grits tasted empty without it.
Creole shrimp omelet brought the rich flavors of the Gulf Coast to morning tables, folding tender shrimp and fresh scallions into fluffy eggs seasoned with paprika and a touch of cayenne. Shrimp were quickly sautéed with butter and garlic until just pink, then combined with beaten eggs and poured into a hot skillet. As the omelet puffed, the seafood infused the eggs with a briny sweetness that spoke of Louisiana waters. Some cooks added diced bell peppers or a spoonful of tomato sauce for extra color and depth, while others finished with a squeeze of lemon. This breakfast balanced elegance and everyday comfort, reflecting African-American culinary ties to coastal Creole traditions. Families savored the dish on special weekends or when fresh shrimp were plentiful, making breakfast feel like a celebration. The Creole shrimp omelet captured the spirit of New Orleans and the surrounding Gulf, proving that a simple egg dish could deliver vibrant flavor and a taste of Southern heritage before the day began. Egg and rice bowls were one of those fast, dependable breakfasts grandparents made without thinking, because the ingredients were always there and the result was always good. A pot of rice from last night could be rewarmed with a pat of butter, turning it soft and fragrant again. Then came the egg, fried or scrambled, laid gently over the top like a finishing touch. Only older hands knew how to time perfectly. The yolk soaked into the rice or the scrambled bits mixed through, creating a bowl that tasted warm, mild, and deeply comforting. It was cheap, quick, and endlessly reliable, the kind of breakfast that made mornings feel steady. Families loved it because nothing went to waste, because rice could stretch farther than any box of cereal ever could. Egg and rice bowls tasted like routine, like care, like the kind of quiet morning love that came before the sun was fully up. Fish roe and onions was a breakfast plate that reflected the close ties African American communities had with rivers and local fishing. Roe sacks were cleaned and seasoned, then pan-fried in lard or butter until firm and golden. Onions were fried alongside, adding sweetness and balancing the rich flavor of the roe. The combination was eaten hot, often with bread or cornbread, creating a meal that was hearty and protein-rich. It was not a glamorous dish, but it was reliable and nutritious, making it an important breakfast in households that lived close to waterways. Roe was affordable compared to other proteins, and using it showed the resourcefulness of cooks who relied on what was readily available. Though not common today, fish roe and onions once held a respected place at the table, carrying both sustenance and tradition. Homemade apple butter on toast was the taste of patience and the smell of love that never hurried. It began with baskets of apples, peeled, cored, and cooked slow over low fire until they turned deep brown and velvety. The stirring never stopped, hour after hour, until the mixture thickened into something smooth as memory itself. A spoonful spread over toast was all it took to turn an ordinary morning into something sacred. It was sweet, but not loud. Subtle, warm, and familiar, like a quiet Sunday with family. Mothers filled jars with it in the fall, sealing them tight for the months when the trees went bare and fresh fruit was only a memory. When opened in winter, that first whiff carried the scent of sunlight and cinnamon, the echo of orchards and laughter. Children slathered it on toast while elders smiled, remembering the same taste from decades before. It was more than food. It was time preserved, proof that care could be tasted and love could be stored in glass. Each jar of apple butter wasn't just a pantry staple. It was a family heirloom in disguise, made to be shared, savored, and remembered. Corncob jelly was sweetness made from what everyone else would have thrown away. When the kernels were long gone, grandmothers gathered the empty cobs, boiled them until the water blushed golden, and stirred in sugar until it gleamed like melted sunlight. The scent filled the air, soft and buttery, with a whisper of summer still clinging to the pot. Once cooled, it set into a glossy jelly, clear as amber and delicate as spun glass. Spread on biscuits or cornbread, it shimmered in the morning light, tasting faintly of cornfields and warm days. There was something almost magical in the way it turned waste into beauty, a sweet defiance against hunger and hardship. Each jar of corncob jelly held more than flavor. It held proof that nothing in a southern kitchen was ever truly useless. It was passed between neighbors, sold at church socials, or gifted with a ribbon tied around the lid. For families who had little, it brought luxury to breakfast and hope to the table. Corncob jelly was not just food, it was gratitude preserved. Sweet potato coffee cake was a breakfast that carried warmth, thrift, and community in every slice. Families would mash leftover sweet potatoes into the batter, seasoning it with cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes cloves before baking it in heavy cast-iron pans that gave it a perfect crust. The result was moist and spiced, with a natural sweetness that came not from sugar, but from the potatoes themselves, making it both healthy and filling. It was often served at church gatherings or Sunday breakfasts when a little something special was needed on the table to bring people together. The dish reflected African American traditions of stretching what was available into something memorable, proving that nothing went to waste in kitchens where creativity was survival. Sweet potatoes were plentiful and affordable, making them an easy way to feed a family while also adding vitamins and nourishment to the meal. The cake was often paired with coffee, hot milk, or even molasses drinks, making it a centerpiece of mornings that were simple yet comforting. Though it is rarely baked today, this coffee cake once carried generations through hard times and sweet mornings alike, leaving memories of warmth, family, and resilience with every bite.
Number 20, fried chicken at breakfast. Leftover fried chicken from the night before, eaten cold at the table or reheated in a skillet with a little grease. Chicken at breakfast violated every rule the dietary guidelines laid down after 1980. Fried food before noon was treated as reckless, not resourceful. Cold fried chicken retains its protein fully, and the skin rendered most of its fat during the original cooking. What remained was a thin, crisp shell over lean meat. Reheating in a skillet added almost no extra calories. A drumstick and a biscuit provided more sustained energy and more complete protein than a bowl of cereal with skim milk. The families eating fried chicken at 7 in the morning were not indulging. They were turning last night into this morning, and the fuel held. Here's the pattern nobody talks about. The cholesterol panic that swept American medicine in the 1960s and 1970s did not land equally. It landed hardest on the communities that could least afford to change. When the guidelines said to stop eating eggs, stop cooking with lard, stop frying, stop using organ meats, they were describing the entire breakfast table of rural Black America. Not one item on that list, all of them. The replacement foods, margarine, cereal, low-fat yogurt, processed turkey products were more expensive, less satisfying, and in many cases worse for long-term health. They required a grocery store, not a garden. They required a brand name, not a grandmother. The people who had been eating the old way were not making bad choices. They were making the only choices available, and those choices turned out to be rooted in nutritional logic that the science took decades to catch up with.
Rice and eggs. Breakfast bowls turned yesterday's supper into a fresh and filling morning meal. Leftover rice was fried gently in butter until each grain glistened, then topped with softly scrambled eggs, seasoned with salt and a touch of black pepper. Sometimes bits of smoked sausage or garden vegetables were added for extra flavor, but the dish was satisfying even in its simplest form. Families appreciated how nothing went to waste and how this hearty bowl provided energy for a full day's work. Grandparents remember stirring the rice as it warmed, the smell of butter filling the air while eggs cooked slowly to a creamy finish. Served hot and eaten straight from the pan or in deep bowls, this breakfast was both practical and comforting. It was a favorite for busy households where mornings demanded quick, nourishing meals, and it continues to represent the ingenuity of cooks who turned leftovers into something new and delicious. Souse meat with eggs was a breakfast that showed how African American cooks turned preservation into sustenance. Souse meat, made by boiling and seasoning pig parts into a gelatinous loaf, was sliced and fried in skillets until crisp at the edges. Served alongside eggs, it made for a hearty and protein-rich plate that was affordable for working families. The flavors were strong and savory, with vinegar and spice balancing the richness of the pork. Souse meat was common because it allowed families to preserve cuts that might otherwise go to waste, ensuring nothing was lost. For children, the texture could be unusual, but it was familiar to those who grew up with it as part of the household routine. Adults appreciated its practicality, especially when paired with eggs that added bulk to the meal. Though it has faded from most breakfast tables, souse meat with eggs once reflected resilience, tradition, and the unyielding ability to make much from little.
Number 15, tomato gravy over biscuits. Not tomato sauce, tomato gravy. You started with bacon drippings in a skillet, added flour, and stirred until it browned, then poured in a can of stewed tomatoes and let it simmer until it thickened into a chunky, savory gravy, somehow both sweet and smoky. Pour it over a split biscuit and you had a breakfast that tasted like a southern garden and a smokehouse having a conversation. This was a staple in Black households across Alabama and Mississippi, especially in months when canned tomatoes were the only fruit in the cupboard. A can cost 12 cents. The drippings and flour were already there. For a senior on a fixed income, this required almost no shopping and used ingredients that kept for months. Modern food writers call it a forgotten classic. It was never forgotten by the people who needed it. Number 13, hog jowl with black coffee. A single thin slice of smoked hog jowl with a cup of strong black coffee was the breakfast of men who had to be at the mill or the field by sunrise. The jowl came from the cheek of the pig and cost almost nothing because most white grocery stores did not want it. In a soul food household, it was treasured. One slice in a hot pan rendered into smoky brown grease and curled up crisp at the edges. The coffee, boiled in a battered enamel pot and poured strong enough to stand a spoon in, washed it down. There was no toast, no eggs, no fuss. Just meat, fat, and heat in the belly with the smell of wood smoke still in the cured pork. Black families in the Carolinas and Tennessee mountain country ate this 6 days a week through the winter, and grandmothers swore it was what kept the men working past sundown without sitting down once. Number 6, fatback and eggs. This was the meal that smelled like Monday. A woman in Albany, Georgia, would slice fatback thin, fry it until the edges curled and the fat turned golden, then crack eggs directly into the same skillet. The eggs cooked in the rendered pork fat, the whites crisping at the edges, the yolks still soft. She served it all on one plate with a biscuit on the side. Fatback was the fatty cut from the back of a hog, salt cured and shelf stable for months. You did not need a refrigerator to keep it. You did not need a special trip to the store. It sat in the pantry wrapped in cloth, ready whenever you were. In the 1950s, this was probably the most common weekday breakfast in Black homes across the rural South. It was fast, it was cheap, it was filling, and it was exactly the kind of breakfast that nutritionists would spend the next 50 years telling you not to eat. Your grandmother did not listen. She had people to feed. Number 14, smothered sausage and onions. Pork sausage, links, or patties, browned in a skillet until the casing split and the fat rendered out, then lifted from the pan and set aside. Into the drippings went thick slices of yellow onion, stirred and cooked low until they turned soft, translucent, and sweet. A spoonful of flour went in next, stirred into the fat until it darkened slightly, and then water or a little broth, enough to make a gravy that thickened around the onions and pulled everything together. The sausage went back in and simmered until the whole pan became one thing instead of separate parts. Spooned over rice or split biscuit, smothered sausage was breakfast that ate like dinner. The onions melted into the gravy. The sausage gave up its seasoning to the sauce. The flour held it all together in a way that felt substantial and warm, even on a cool morning. Smothering was a technique that ran through every meal in a Black Southern kitchen. Smothered chicken for Sunday, smothered pork chops for Wednesday, and smothered sausage for Saturday morning, because even breakfast deserved the same care as supper. A grandmother who smothered sausage was not trying to impress anyone. She was applying the same method she used for everything else, because she only knew one way to cook, and that way involved patience, low heat, and onions. The gravy left in the pan after the sausage was gone was worth sopping with the last piece of bread. Nobody left it behind. And nobody asked for the recipe because there was no recipe. There was a skillet, there was onion, there was sausage, and there was a woman who knew when the flour had cooked long enough by the way the kitchen smelled. The coffee was on before anything else. In the dark, before the stove was fully lit, She set the percolator going and waited for that slow, rhythmic bubble that meant the day had started. But in the 1950s, when sugar competed with flour and milk and soap for every dollar, many black households sweetened coffee with blackstrap molasses instead. A heavy spoonful stirred into strong coffee turned it darker and thicker with a bittersweet depth that white sugar could never match. Blackstrap was rich in iron and calcium, which made it more than a sweetener. It was medicine dressed as morning. A splash of canned milk cut the bitterness just enough. The smell filled the kitchen with something you cannot find today. Roasted grounds, dark molasses, and tinned milk hanging in the air like a hymn nobody sang out loud. That cup was the first thing she touched every morning and the last ritual she gave up when her hands stopped working. The percolator sits in a box now. Nobody has plugged it in since.
Stewed prunes and citrus offered a naturally sweet and nourishing side that fit perfectly with the back-to-nature movement of the 1970s. Dried prunes were simmered gently in water with slices of orange or lemon until they softened into a rich compote. A touch of cinnamon or clove added warmth, and the citrus brightened the deep, earthy flavor of the fruit. This dish required little sugar because the natural sweetness of the prunes intensified as they cooked, creating a syrupy juice that tasted indulgent yet wholesome. Served warm over oatmeal, alongside biscuits, or even chilled with yogurt, it provided fiber and essential vitamins that families valued. African American households embraced it for both its practicality and comfort, turning an inexpensive ingredient into something special. Stewed prunes and citrus stood as a testament to mindful cooking, where a simple pot of fruit could deliver nutrition and quiet pleasure, reminding everyone that breakfast could be as healthful as it was delicious without any extravagant ingredients or effort. Cornbread and buttermilk cups were the kind of breakfast that felt both rustic and comforting, the sort of meal grandparents made without measuring or fuss because they had been doing it their whole lives. Leftover cornbread never went to waste, not when it could be crumbled into a bowl and soaked in cold buttermilk until the pieces softened but kept just enough texture to make each bite interesting. The tang of the buttermilk balanced the slight sweetness of the cornbread, creating a flavor that felt simple yet deeply satisfying. Some families added a spoonful of sugar, others preferred it plain, but either way, it tasted like something honest and nourishing. It was a breakfast built for long days, a quick way to fill stomachs without spending money or time. Children who grew up on it remember the chilly shock of the buttermilk, the softness of the crumbs, and the quiet pleasure of eating something that required no stove at all. It tasted like tradition handed down through memory rather than recipes, a meal tied to rural kitchens, hardworking families, and morning routines shaped by practicality. Even today, people who try it for the first time often describe it as unexpectedly comforting, like discovering a forgotten piece of their own history. Cornbread and buttermilk cups might seem humble, but in the hands of grandparents, they became something far richer than the ingredients suggested. Salt fish and Johnny cakes was a breakfast rooted deeply in heritage and tradition. Salt fish, preserved and dried to last for months, was soaked, flaked, and pan-fried until flavorful and tender. Johnny cakes, simple cornmeal cakes cooked on a griddle, were served alongside, their soft texture soaking up the salty richness of the fish. Together, the two made a breakfast that was filling, balanced, and steeped in history. The pairing reflected African and Caribbean influences that endured in African American kitchens, blending practicality with cultural memory. Salt fish provided protein when fresh fish was unavailable, while Johnny cakes required only cornmeal, water, and a little fat. The result was a plate that carried both thrift and tradition, ensuring families had strength for the day ahead. For many, it was a taste of survival and a connection to community. Saltfish and Johnny cakes once held pride on the table, even if today they are rarely remembered. Shrimp and grits brought the coast to the kitchen, turning humble ingredients into a dish worth remembering. Fresh or frozen shrimp were sautéed in butter with onions, garlic, and a little spice, then poured over steaming grits. The creamy base and savory topping came together like a song, smooth, salty, and rich. It was Sunday food, special but simple enough for anyone who knew the value of good seasoning. For families near the water, it was tradition. For those inland, it was aspiration on a plate. The smell of butter and shrimp carried through the house like a promise of joy. This was soul food in its finest form, made from what you had, perfected with love. Shrimp and grits weren't just breakfast. They were belonging, celebration, and pride, all spooned into one perfect bowl. Some families added bacon for extra depth, others threw in peppers or a dash of hot sauce, turning the dish into a reflection of their own roots. No matter how it was made, it always carried a taste of comfort and community. It was the kind of breakfast that made people linger a little longer at the table, talking, laughing, and remembering where they came from. Roasted chestnuts carried warmth and nourishment through the cold months when plantation rations were meager and gardens lay dormant. Enslaved families foraged chestnut trees that grew wild in the surrounding woods, gathering the smooth brown nuts and roasting them in hearth ashes or iron skillets until their shells cracked and the sweet flesh softened. The nuts' high energy content and natural sweetness made it an important source of calories and comfort, especially during long winter evenings. Roasted chestnuts became part of a wider African-American food tradition, appearing in holiday celebrations and roadside markets after emancipation. Their gentle flavor paired well with cornmeal breads and simple stews, and many families passed down techniques for roasting and storing them long after the plantation era ended. Today, roasted chestnuts sold at winter festivals and city street corners carry echoes of that history, reminding us that what began as a survival practice also nurtured community and seasonal ritual for generations who transformed hardship into enduring culture. Pickled pig's feet with rice was a breakfast plate that blended tang, tradition, thrift, and a powerful sense of cultural memory. Pig's feet were boiled, seasoned with spices, and pickled in vinegar, creating a dish that was both flavorful and long-lasting in households where preservation was survival. Served cold from jars or warmed gently on the stove, they were paired with rice, which balanced the sharp tanginess and made the meal hearty enough to carry people through long days of labor. For families with limited resources, this dish ensured that every single part of the hog was used and nothing valuable went to waste. The pickling process preserved the meat, allowing it to last far beyond what fresh cuts could manage in kitchens without refrigeration. Though the flavor was bold, tough, and not to everyone's taste, it carried strong roots in African-American food traditions shaped by necessity and resilience. Rice added comfort, balance, and affordability, turning the plate into a full meal that could feed many. Pickled pig's feet with rice was not just food, but a cultural marker of thrift and endurance. Though rarely eaten today, it once stood as an important morning staple.
Number 24, hog brains and scrambled eggs. This is the one that makes people stop chewing. Scrambled eggs mixed with hog brains, cooked low and slow in a cast iron skillet until the whole thing went soft and creamy. The cholesterol content alone was enough to put it on the banned list. One serving had more cholesterol than what the government said a person should eat in 3 days. So families stopped, or they kept cooking it and stopped talking about it. What the dietary guidelines missed, dietary cholesterol from whole foods does not raise blood cholesterol the way they assumed. The body adjusts its own production. Hog brains are dense with omega-3 fatty acids, B12, and phosphatidylcholine, a compound that supports memory. The breakfast that sounded the most dangerous may have been feeding the brain exactly what it needed.
Hoppin' John Morning Skillet brought together black-eyed peas, rice, and smoky meat for a dish that powered long days of labor. Dried peas were simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and a ham hock until tender, then combined with fluffy rice in a single heavy pan. The flavors melded into a savory blend where each grain soaked up the rich broth. A sprinkle of fresh green onions brightened the skillet just before serving, adding a touch of freshness to the hearty meal. Families valued this breakfast for its affordability and the energy it provided, making it a favorite for farmers and dock workers facing dawn-to-dusk shifts. Grandparents recall stirring the pot before sunrise and letting the scent of peas and pork wake the household. Traditionally eaten for luck at New Year, it became a daily staple whenever a strong start was needed. Each spoonful carried both history and hope, a sustaining meal that remains a beloved memory of African American kitchens. Okra fritters were once a common breakfast food that made use of one of the most iconic crops in African American gardens. Fresh okra would be chopped, mixed with cornmeal and seasoning, and fried in small patties until golden brown. The result was crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, and full of earthy flavor that paired perfectly with hot coffee or milk. For families, okra fritters were both affordable and filling, using whatever the garden provided in abundance. They could be eaten plain with cane syrup or alongside eggs, making them versatile as well as practical. The dish reflected the deep agricultural roots of African American communities, where nothing grown went to waste. It was also a way of starting the day with something satisfying before long hours of labor. While okra remains popular in Southern cooking, the fritter form has faded from breakfast tables, leaving behind only the memory of mornings built on thrift and flavor.
Number 20, fried green tomatoes. Long before Hollywood turned the name into a movie, fried green tomatoes were a workday breakfast. When the garden produced more than a family could eat and frost was coming, mothers picked them green and sliced them thick. Each slice got dredged in cornmeal, then fried in bacon grease until crispy outside and soft inside. The contrast was the whole point. Crunchy coating, almost creamy tomato with a tartness that cut through the richness. A plate of fried green tomatoes with a biscuit and coffee cost nothing because the tomatoes came from the yard the way they used to in every household, and the cornmeal was already in the cupboard. Black families across Alabama and Mississippi made this 3 or 4 times a week during tomato season. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote it down. It was August, the tomatoes weren't ripe, and breakfast needed to happen. Sweet potato pancakes with sorghum. Leftover sweet potatoes from Sunday dinner almost always ended up on Tuesday's griddle, smashed into pancakes thick with sorghum syrup. The potatoes from Sunday got mashed cold with a fork, then mixed with a half cup of flour, 1 egg, and just enough buttermilk to loosen the batter. A small ladle poured the mix onto a hot, greased griddle, and the cakes came up orange-brown with crisp, lacy edges. The sorghum bottle sat on the table because it cost less than maple syrup and held more flavor in 1 spoon. Black families across the South kept a jug of sorghum on the shelf year-round, since 1 gallon could last from October planting to April plowing. The pancakes filled up a child fast, used food that would have gone bad by Wednesday, and tasted like dessert in the middle of a hard week. Number 11, stewed tomatoes over rice. This was a breakfast most people outside the South have never heard of. A woman in Orangeburg, South Carolina, would heat a can of stewed tomatoes in a saucepan, add a spoonful of sugar and a pinch of salt, and pour the warm tomatoes over a plate of steamed rice. That was the meal. Some women added a little butter. Others crumbled day-old biscuit into the mixture. The sweetness of the tomatoes against the starch of the rice made a breakfast that was surprisingly filling. This was a pantry breakfast. Everything came from the shelf. The rice was already cooked from the night before. The tomatoes came in a can that cost a dime. When there was nothing fresh in the house, there was always this. It disappeared because it looked plain. It looked like nothing, but it tasted like a kitchen where somebody cared enough to make sure you did not leave the house hungry. That mattered. Number 2, grits. Not instant, not quick. Stone ground white corn grits, cooked low on the stove for 30 minutes or more, stirred with a long wooden spoon so the bottom did not catch and scorch. Water, a pinch of salt, and time. That was the recipe. When they were done, they were thick enough to hold a spoon upright and smooth enough to pour slow. A lump of butter went in at the table, pressed into the center and stirred until it melted into a golden pool. Some ate them with red-eyed gravy, the dark pan sauce made from ham drippings, and a splash of black coffee. Some ate them with cheese. Most ate them with butter and nothing else, because that was enough. Grits were the anchor of every plate on this list. They showed up under the eggs, beside the sausage, beneath the gravy. A Saturday morning without grits was not a Saturday morning. It was just a day. The smell of stewed prunes was the smell of a grandmother's kitchen before the rest of the house stirred. She put them on the night before, dried prunes in a small pot with water and a little sugar, and by morning they had swelled soft and dark, swimming in syrup thick as cough medicine. She served them in a bowl with a pour of cream or canned evaporated milk that swirled white through the purple. In the 1950s, dried fruit kept for months in the pantry, making prunes a dependable winter breakfast when nothing fresh was around. Doctors told black mothers that prunes were good for the blood, and they listened, spooning them into kids who complained about the wrinkled skin and the taste that sat between sweet and old. You ate them because she told you to. You hated them then. Now you would give anything to sit at that table again, to hear the clink of the spoon against the bowl. The prunes are still on the shelf. The woman who made them matter is not.
Country sausage and red pepper gravy turned ordinary biscuits into a feast, combining smoky pork with the sweetness of peppers and onions. Sausage browned slowly in a heavy skillet, releasing drippings that formed the base of a creamy gravy thickened with flour and milk. Strips of red bell pepper and chopped onions simmered in the mixture, lending a vibrant color and a subtle sweetness that balanced the savory richness. Poured over split biscuits or spooned onto grits, the gravy soaked into every layer, ensuring each bite was flavorful and filling. In African American kitchens of the 1970s, this dish represented comfort and abundance, a way to stretch a small amount of meat into a meal for the entire family. Some cooks added a touch of crushed red pepper for gentle heat, while others served sliced tomatoes alongside for freshness. Country sausage and red pepper gravy brought together bold taste and home-style satisfaction, making mornings feel special even on the busiest days. Salt pork gravy over bread was one of those breakfasts created from necessity, yet it tasted like something that belonged in a country diner. Grandparents would fry slices of salt pork until the fat rendered out and the meat crisped, releasing a savory aroma that meant a hearty meal was on the way. The drippings were whisked with flour and milk to create a thick, salty gravy that clung to the spoon, rich and filling despite its humble ingredients. Poured over toast or biscuits, it transformed simple bread into something warm and deeply satisfying. This was a breakfast made for long days and empty pockets, a way to stretch flavor as far as it could go. Children did not think about thrift. They just knew the gravy tasted good and made the morning feel special. The saltiness, the creaminess, and the soft bread soaking up every drop created a combination that lingered in both taste and memory. It was the kind of meal that carried families through tough times and still managed to feel generous. Even today, people who grew up with salt pork gravy remember it with a fondness that nothing else can quite match. Grits with cheese and scallions brought richness to the Southern table like few dishes could. Slow cooked until creamy, the grits were stirred with butter, sharp cheese, and chopped scallions. The result was smooth, savory, and full of depth. It was the kind of dish that made people linger over breakfast just a little longer. The steam rose thick, carrying the smell of warmth and comfort through the room. Grits had always been a staple, but this version felt like Sunday. It was humble food, made elegant through patience and love. Families ate it with fried fish, eggs, or alone, spooning up every last bit. Cheese added indulgence, scallions added brightness, and together they turned the simplest grain into something remarkable. It was a dish that celebrated flavor without waste, a small luxury earned through care. Every bowl felt like a reward after a long week. a quiet reminder that even the simplest foods could still feel special when shared. Sausage gravy over biscuits was the kind of breakfast that stretched a little meat into a feast and wrapped it in love. Mothers knew how to make magic from scraps, browning bits of sausage or leftover drippings in a cast-iron skillet until the kitchen filled with the smell of salt, spice, and promise. A handful of flour came next, whisked in just right to soak up the grease, followed by milk poured slow and steady. The mixture thickened into velvet, bubbling softly as it turned from simple to sacred. Poured over hot biscuits, split open and steaming, it became a meal that could chase away hunger and bring comfort to tired hearts. The first spoonful was pure satisfaction, warm, peppery, and rich enough to make you forget how little went into it. It was breakfast made with patience, a recipe passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. That skillet of sausage gravy meant safety, care, and family. No one left the table hungry, and everyone knew they were loved. Chitterlings and eggs were for Sunday mornings when the whole house smelled like patience and pride. The chitterlings were cleaned carefully, washed again and again, then seasoned deep with salt, pepper, and onions before hitting the skillet. They fried slowly, releasing a scent that told everyone it was a day worth slowing down for. The eggs came next, scrambled in the same pan so they could soak up every drop of flavor left behind. Together they made a breakfast rich enough to feel like a celebration, not just a meal. It was a dish born from necessity, but carried with joy, a way to turn what others overlooked into something worth gathering for. The taste was bold, earthy, and unforgettable, layered with memory and meaning. Coffee brewed in the corner, laughter circled the table, and music sometimes played from a radio humming low. Chitterlings and eggs were not for every morning. They were for the ones that mattered most. They tasted of care, community, and the comfort of surviving one more week together. Each plate told a story that stretched back generations, of families who knew how to make beauty from struggle and celebration from scraps. Hog maw and potatoes was a breakfast that carried both weight and flavor for households that needed energy for the day ahead. Hog maw, or hog stomach, was cleaned carefully, seasoned, and slow-cooked until tender. Potatoes were added to the pot, soaking up the rich broth and spices as they simmered together. The result was a dish that was hearty, savory, and deeply satisfying, often eaten in large portions to provide strength before long hours in the fields or factories. Though not a delicacy, it was respected because it made use of parts of the hog that otherwise might have been discarded. The combination of meat and potatoes provided both protein and comfort, ensuring that families started their mornings with something filling. Hog maw and potatoes reflected resilience, turning less desirable cuts into meals that carried pride and tradition. Though it is rarely seen on tables today, it once served as a dependable morning staple.
Number 14, chitlins at breakfast. Chitterlings, cleaned and boiled for hours the night before, then sliced and fried in a skillet the next morning alongside eggs. This was plantation food. Enslaved people received the parts of the hog that the slaveholder would not eat: the intestines, the feet, the ears, the tail. They turned those scraps into meals that sustained entire communities through forced labor and starvation rations. The medical establishment treated chitlins as a relic. Organ meats and offal were lumped together as cholesterol bombs, and public health campaigns in the 1970s and 1980s specifically discouraged their consumption. The message was clear: modern people eat chicken breasts and lean cuts, not intestines. Chitterlings are rich in collagen, gelatin, and B vitamins. The long boiling process breaks down connective tissue into a form of protein that supports joint health and gut lining repair. In communities where arthritis, joint pain, and digestive problems were common, especially among older adults who had spent decades doing physical labor, chitlins were doing real physiological work that no pill could replace. The cleaning and preparation took hours, sometimes the better part of an evening. The women who did that work understood something about patience and nutrition that the fast food era deliberately forgot. Cleaning chitlins was not a chore people did because they had no choice. By the 1970s, they had choices. They kept cleaning them because the food meant something and because it worked. The doctors who told families to stop eating chitlins were not just giving bad advice. They were asking people to abandon a food that carried the full weight of survival, memory, and biological function in a single skillet. Modern gastroenterology now studies collagen and gelatin as therapeutic compounds for gut repair. The science arrived late. The grandmothers did not wait for it.
Grits with crackling bits brought a satisfying crunch to the creamy comfort of stone-ground corn. Grits were simmered slowly with water and a pinch of salt until they reached a silky texture, then enriched with crispy pieces of pork cracklings that added both flavor and texture. The rich aroma of rendering pork fat filled the kitchen, signaling a breakfast that promised warmth and sustenance. Families loved this dish because it turned inexpensive corn and leftover pork into something memorable and deeply satisfying. Grandparents recall how the cracklings popped in the pan, a sound that always brought children running to the stove. Served in deep bowls with a pat of butter, these grits provided lasting energy for long mornings of work in the fields or at the mill. Each spoonful carried a mix of creamy corn and smoky crunch, a combination that reflected the resourcefulness and creativity of cooks who knew how to make every ingredient shine. Collard green omelet was a breakfast born from thrift and the habit of making yesterday's leftovers stretch. Collard greens, usually cooked long and slow with seasoning, were often tucked into eggs the next morning, creating a dish that was both frugal and flavorful. Families valued it because it made use of what they already had, ensuring nothing went to waste. The combination of tender greens with fluffy eggs gave a balance of nutrition and satisfaction. For children, it was a familiar flavor carried into a new form, while adults enjoyed the heartiness without requiring more expensive meat. It was a dish that tied breakfast to dinner, blending the rhythms of the household kitchen into one continuous cycle of reuse. Betty Crocker kitchens may have praised convenience, but African-American homes thrived on this kind of ingenuity. Collard green omelets are rare today, but they once carried the quiet wisdom of making much from little and starting mornings strong.
Number 24, coffee-soaked bread. A cup of black coffee and a heel of day-old bread. You tore the bread into pieces, dropped them into the coffee, added a spoonful of sugar, and ate it with a spoon-like soup. In the Mississippi Delta, this was called SOP. In parts of Alabama, they called it coffee, bread. The coffee softened the bread into something porridge-like, warm and caffeinated enough to get a person moving back then. A pound of coffee cost 75 cents in 1964. A loaf of bread was 21 cents. Together, a week of breakfast for under $1. Nobody was proud of this recipe, but thousands of elderly black men and women ate this alone in quiet kitchens across the South, and they never told their children because admitting you ate bread soaked in coffee felt like admitting something larger about your life. Number 14, scrambled eggs stretched with flour. When a dozen eggs cost 57 cents and a household had 6 mouths to feed, you stretched the eggs with flour and nobody complained. 2 eggs got beaten in a bowl with a heaping tablespoon of flour and a splash of water until smooth. That mixture poured into a hot grease pan made enough fluffy curds to feed 3 children. The flour added body, the eggs added flavor, and the pan came out almost as full as if 4 eggs had gone in. Working mothers across the urban South used this trick on Wednesdays and Thursdays when payday was still 2 mornings away. Older folks today remember it as a perfectly normal breakfast and never once thought of it as cutting corners. It was simply how breakfast got made. What we now romanticize as soul food started right here at the kitchen counter with a tablespoon of flour stretching what our mothers had into what the household needed. Salmon croquettes. If there is one breakfast that every black family in America can trace back to a grandmother, it is this one. A woman in Memphis, Tennessee would open a can of pink salmon, drain it, flake it with a fork, and remove the soft bones with her fingers. She mixed the fish with a beaten egg, diced onion, a little flour or cracker crumbs, salt, and black pepper, then shaped the mixture into flat patties and fried them in a skillet until they were golden brown on each side. She served them with white rice and a biscuit, or with grits and a slice of tomato. In the 1950s, a can of salmon cost about 25 cents. It sat on the pantry shelf for months. It required no refrigeration. And in the hands of a woman who had been making these since she was 12 years old, it became a breakfast that tasted like it came from a restaurant. Toni Tipton Martin, in her cookbook Jubilee, traced salmon croquettes through 2 centuries of African-American cooking. She found recipes from the 1930s Los Angeles Negro Culinary Art Club that rolled the patties in crushed cornflakes for extra crunch. During the Great Migration, black families carried this recipe from the South to cities like Detroit, Chicago, and New York. The can of salmon traveled with them. The croquette recipe traveled in their hands. It was the last breakfast many grandmothers taught and the first one most granddaughters forgot. And if you grew up in a black household, the sound of salmon frying in a cast iron skillet on a Saturday morning is a sound you will hear in your memory for the rest of your life. That was home. Here's my challenge. Make one of these breakfasts this week. Just one. The salmon croquettes, the hoe cakes, the grits with nothing but butter and salt. Then sit down at the table. Not the couch, not your car, the table. Set a place, eat it slow, because these breakfasts were never just about calories. They were about making sure every person in the house left the kitchen fed and seen before the world got hold of them. There is a woman somewhere in your family tree who stood at a stove before dawn and made something out of cornmeal and determination that no restaurant could ever replicate. That knowledge does not have to disappear with her. You can be the one who asks, tell me in the comments which one of these breakfasts your grandmother made. I want to know if the salmon croquettes get more love than the grits. Nutrition. Number 11, egg bread. A slice of white bread with a hole torn or cut out of the center, placed flat in a greased skillet, and an egg cracked directly into the opening. The bread fried on one side, then the whole thing was flipped carefully, the egg cooking inside its frame until the white set and the yolk stayed soft. Some called it toad in a hole, some called it egg in a basket. Most called it nothing at all because it did not need a name. It was what happened when there were 2 eggs and 4 children and a grandmother who could make mathematics work on a plate. 1 egg became a full piece of toast, a protein, and a meal that felt complete, even though it came from almost nothing. It was engineering disguised as breakfast. Sweet potato and sausage casserole filled African-American kitchens with the scent of caramelized sugar and smoky pork. Thick rounds of sweet potato were layered with sliced smoked sausage, seasoned with cinnamon, brown sugar, and a touch of cayenne. The dish was covered and baked until the potatoes softened and the sausage released its fat into the layers below. The result was a sticky, savory, sweet combination that balanced richness with earthiness. Families valued it because both ingredients were affordable and filling, stretching easily across a crowded table. It appeared at suppers and church potlucks, carried in foil-covered dishes by women who cooked from memory. Children loved the sweetness, while adults appreciated its staying power. Sweet potato and sausage casserole carried warmth, thrift, and tradition in every golden layer.
Fried apples with brown sugar filled kitchens with the scent of caramel and spice as butter sizzled in heavy skillets across African American homes of the 1970s. Thick apple slices were laid into the pan where they softened and browned, soaking up melted butter and a slow sprinkle of dark brown sugar. The sugar melted into a glossy syrup that coated every piece, creating a warm and fragrant side that paired perfectly with hot bread or flaky biscuits. Some cooks added a pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg, while others squeezed in a little lemon juice to brighten the sweetness. Families loved these fried apples as a weekend treat, serving them alongside sausage, grits, or even spooned over pancakes for an indulgent start to the morning. The dish honored a tradition of turning simple farm fruit into something special without wasting a single ingredient. Fried apples with brown sugar captured the heart of home-style cooking, transforming an everyday apple into a rich and memorable breakfast delight. Country sausage patties with cane syrup were a sweet and savory breakfast that carried the flavor of Southern tradition. Grandparents often made sausage from scratch or bought it fresh, shaping it into patties with practiced hands. The patties sizzled in the skillet, filling the house with a smell that meant the day was off to a strong start. Once cooked, they were served alongside cane syrup, thick and dark, ready for dipping or drizzling. The combination of salty sausage and sweet syrup created a harmony that felt indulgent even when the ingredients were simple. It stuck to your ribs, kept you full, and tasted like a morning wrapped in warmth. Cane syrup was cheaper and easier to find than maple syrup, but it had a bold flavor all its own. Families passed down the preference across generations, pairing it with biscuits, sausage, and sometimes even eggs. Country sausage patties with cane syrup were more than breakfast. They were the memory of Sunday mornings, crowded tables, and laughter rising like steam from the skillet. Boiled peanuts and cornbread may not sound like a traditional breakfast, but in rural kitchens it was a regular pairing. Peanuts were boiled until soft and seasoned with salt, their briny flavor creating a hearty snack that doubled as a meal. Cornbread was baked fresh or left over from the night before, crumbled and eaten alongside the peanuts. The combination was salty, filling, and inexpensive, making it ideal for large families and farm workers. Boiled peanuts provided protein, while cornbread gave comfort and substance, ensuring that no one went hungry before heading out to work. This pairing reflected the way African American kitchens used what was abundant and turned it into something reliable. Children grew up eating it without question, while adults valued it for its practicality and taste. Though not common on today's breakfast tables, boiled peanuts and cornbread once stood as a symbol of resilience, thrift, and the creativity of turning humble foods into sustaining meals. Homemade butter rolls were what happened when breakfast met dessert. Soft yeast dough was rolled up and baked in a pan of creamy, buttery custard until puffed and golden. As they baked, the sauce thickened around the rolls, forming sweet, sticky edges that begged to be scraped with a spoon. The smell was pure heaven: vanilla, butter, and warmth. Mothers made them on Sundays or special occasions, serving them hot from the oven when the whole family gathered. They were tender, rich, and full of love. Butter rolls were more than bread. They were joy you could eat, made with patience and pride. Every pan was a masterpiece of resourcefulness, made from the simplest ingredients: flour, sugar, milk, and faith. When they came out bubbling and brown, the whole house fell silent for a moment just to breathe in the scent. They were often shared with neighbors or saved for the preacher, a sweet gesture of community and care. Coffee and condensed milk was the quiet start to countless mornings across generations. Before creamers, sugar packets, or modern machines, people reached for the same trusted can of condensed milk. It was thick, heavy, and sweet enough to turn even the strongest brew into something smooth and soothing. The first pour made a soft hiss, the kind that filled kitchens with calm before the day's noise began. It was more than just coffee. It was company, ritual, and comfort wrapped in steam. Men sipped it before long days in fields and factories. Women drank it while feeding children or ironing clothes. The milk stretched far, lasting through weeks of careful use, every drop measured with love and thrift. It tasted familiar, steady and kind, the same way mornings always began. The smell lingered in the air long after the last sip, a sign the day had officially started. For many, it was their first sweetness, their first warmth, their first reminder that even simple things could feel abundant. Coffee and condensed milk was not fancy, but it was faithful, the flavor of home that stayed the same no matter where life went. Baked cinnamon apples and raisins brought Christmas mornings to life with a smell that felt like home. Grandparents sliced soft red apples, tossing them with butter, brown sugar, and a handful of raisins in an old baking dish. The oven worked slow, turning everything tender and golden, the edges bubbling with caramelized syrup. The scent of cinnamon filled every corner, warm and familiar. It was a dish that didn't need luxury, only love and patience. Served warm, it tasted like memory. Sweet, rich, and comforting in its simplicity. Children spooned it over biscuits or ate it plain, steam rising as they smiled through each bite. It was dessert for breakfast, comfort for cold mornings, and love disguised as thrift. Baked cinnamon apples and raisins reminded families that Christmas joy could come from the simplest things pulled from a pantry and shared with care.
Number 23, fried salt herring at breakfast. A whole salt-cured herring, soaked overnight in water, dredged in cornmeal, and fried in a cast iron skillet until the skin crackled and the bones went soft enough to chew. Doctors saw preserved fish fried in fat and called it a sodium disaster. The herring was loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, and the salt cure preserved them instead of destroying them the way high-heat industrial processing does. The soft, edible bones delivered calcium directly. The cornmeal crust added fiber and slow-burning starch. A single fried herring with a piece of cornbread and a cup of coffee gave a body protein, essential fats, and minerals before the workday started, all from a fish that cost pennies and kept for weeks without refrigeration. The same families who ate this were later told to replace it with cereal fortified with synthetic vitamins. The herring was already doing what the cereal was pretending to do.
Sweet potato biscuits added a gentle sweetness to the morning, making them a treasured treat for families across the South. Mashed sweet potatoes were folded into soft dough along with a spoonful of cane syrup and a touch of warm spices. As the biscuits baked, the natural sugars caramelized, creating a golden crust and a tender, moist interior. Served warm with butter or a smear of homemade jam, they filled kitchens with a scent that promised a comforting start to the day. Grandparents often saved leftover sweet potatoes from supper just to make these biscuits at dawn, stretching every ingredient while creating something that felt indulgent. Their vibrant color and subtle sweetness brightened even the simplest breakfast plates, pairing well with scrambled eggs or strong black coffee. These biscuits were a perfect example of resourceful cooking that turned farm harvests into something both nourishing and memorable, leaving a flavor that still lingers in family stories and worn recipe cards. Sweet potato coffee cake was a breakfast that carried warmth, thrift, and community in every slice. Families would mash leftover sweet potatoes into the batter, seasoning it with cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes cloves before baking it in heavy cast iron pans that gave it a perfect crust. The result was moist and spiced, with a natural sweetness that came not from sugar, but from the potatoes themselves, making it both healthy and filling. It was often served at church gatherings or Sunday breakfasts when a little something special was needed on the table to bring people together. The dish reflected African American traditions of stretching what was available into something memorable, proving that nothing went to waste in kitchens where creativity was survival. Sweet potatoes were plentiful and affordable, making them an easy way to feed a family while also adding vitamins and nourishment to the meal. The cake was often paired with coffee, hot milk, or even molasses drinks, making it a centerpiece of mornings that were simple yet comforting. Though it is rarely baked today, this coffee cake once carried generations through hard times and sweet mornings alike, leaving memories of warmth, family, and resilience with every bite.
Number 23, crackling bread. When a hog was slaughtered, The skin was cut into pieces and rendered until the fat melted and the skin turned into crunchy golden bits called cracklings. Those cracklings went straight into cornbread batter. The result was bread that crackled when you bit into it, rich with pork flavor and studded with crispy morsels. A pan of crackling bread could sit on the counter for 3 days and still taste good. In rural Georgia and the Carolinas, crackling bread with a glass of buttermilk was the traditional breakfast, and it did not need anything else. The cost was nothing because the cracklings were a byproduct of making lard, which was itself a byproduct of the hog already paid for. The hog gave meat for the smokehouse, fat for the lard bucket, and cracklings for the bread. Nothing went to waste because nothing could afford to. Number 25, fried cornmeal mush with cane syrup. For most black families in 1960, the morning started with a pot of yesterday's mush sliced into squares. The rule was simple. Cook a heavy pot of cornmeal on Sunday night, pour it into a loaf pan, and let it sit in the icebox until it was firm enough to slice. By Monday morning, a 1/4-inch slab hit the hot grease and crisped up dark brown on both sides. A spoon of cane syrup or molasses went over the top, and that was breakfast for a working man or a school child. Cornmeal sold for about 18 cents for a 5-pound sack in 1960, which meant a family could eat from that one bag for almost 2 weeks. Nothing got thrown away. The crumbs that fell off the cutting board went into the chicken bucket on the back porch. Number 17, rice and gravy. In parts of Louisiana, South Carolina, and coastal Georgia, rice was not a side dish. It was the center of the plate. A woman in Beaufort, South Carolina, would cook a pot of white rice in the morning, ladle leftover gravy from the night before over the top, and call it breakfast. That was it. Rice and gravy, no egg, no meat, just starch and salt and whatever flavor the gravy carried from supper. The connection between black families and rice runs deep. Enslaved Africans from the rice-growing regions of West Africa were specifically brought to South Carolina because they knew how to cultivate the crop. That knowledge built the entire low country economy, and generations later, their descendants were still eating rice every single morning. The gravy might be beef drippings, it might be onion gravy, it might be nothing more than flour and water browned in a skillet. The rice held it all. That was the whole point. Number 16, liver pudding. Pork liver and pork scraps, ground together with cornmeal, sage, salt, and black pepper, packed into a loaf pan and cooked until it set firm. Sliced cold from the pan and fried in a hot skillet until a dark crust formed on both sides while the inside stayed soft and dense and faintly grainy from the cornmeal. It showed up on breakfast plates across the Carolinas and parts of Virginia and Georgia, sliced thick and served next to eggs and grits. The flavor was earthy and deep, closer to sausage than to liver because the cornmeal and spices did most of the talking. Children who grew up eating liver pudding did not know they were eating liver until somebody told them years later. By then, it was too late to stop liking it. Clabber was raw milk left at room temperature until it thickened and soured on its own, turning into something like yogurt, but sharper, tangier, almost alive. In black households across the rural South during the 1950s, clabber was not a mistake, it was a method. You poured it cold into a bowl, crumbled day-old cornbread on top, and ate it with a spoon. The combination was sour, gritty, and filling enough to carry you through a morning of field work. The tradition ran deeper than the South. West African cultures had been fermenting milk for centuries, and the practice survived in the hands of women who understood what their stomachs needed. Clabber required no refrigeration and no equipment, just patience and a kitchen warm enough for the bacteria to work. If the milk smelled clean and sour, it was ready. If it smelled rotten, you knew the difference without being told. That instinct passed from mother to daughter at the counter, and when pasteurized milk replaced raw, the whole tradition went quiet. On hog killing days, the cracklings came first.
Fried bologna. Breakfast sandwiches turned a simple deli meat into a beloved morning indulgence across African-American neighborhoods. Thick slices of bologna were scored around the edges to keep them from curling, then fried in a hot skillet until the surface blistered and caramelized. The sizzling meat was stacked onto soft white bread with a fried egg, crisp lettuce, or a slice of tomato, creating a sandwich that was both hearty and comforting. Some cooks added a swipe of mustard or a layer of melted cheese, while others preferred it plain to let the smoky flavor shine. Affordable and quick, it became a weekday staple for families and workers needing a satisfying meal before heading out the door. Fried bologna breakfast sandwiches captured the era's love of bold, simple flavors and the creativity of cooks who turned modest ingredients into something memorable, proving that even the humblest cuts could create a breakfast worth savoring with every crisp, savory bite. Stewed apples over grits was the quiet morning comfort many families turned to when fresh fruit was limited, but preserved apples were always within reach. Grandparents would slice apples thin and let them simmer with sugar or syrup until they softened into a fragrant golden mixture that tasted like fall in every season. Meanwhile, a pot of grits bubbled on the stove, thickening slowly as it absorbed the heat. When the stewed apples were spooned over the top, the contrast of creamy grits and sweet fruit felt like a small luxury. It was warm, filling, and gentle, the kind of breakfast that soothed the stomach and the spirit. Some families added cinnamon, others added butter, but most kept it simple because the apples were already sweet enough. This dish was a reminder of home orchards, backyard trees, and jars of preserves lined up on pantry shelves. It tasted like patience and tradition, like the kind of mornings where time moved slower. Even today, stewed apples over grits feels like a forgotten treasure from a quieter time. Rice and butter breakfast bowls were the soft sweetness of memory. Leftover rice from the night before was warmed with a pat of butter, a spoonful of sugar, sometimes a splash of milk. It was cheap, it was fast, and it was beloved. For many Black families across the South, this was the taste of early mornings when the sun was barely up and the day already called. It was comfort without extravagance, rich in warmth, not in cost. The grains soaked in butter, glistening like little pearls, soft but full of life. Some added cinnamon, others left it plain, but everyone knew its calm simplicity. It was the kind of breakfast you could make with your eyes closed and your heart open. Even now, one spoonful could bring back the hum of gospel radio and the sound of the kettle on the stove. Molasses-drenched cornbread was poor man's luxury, the sweet miracle of thrift made beautiful. Leftover cornbread never went to waste. It was sliced or crumbled, soaked in molasses thick as tar, and warmed until every bite was soft and shining. The deep, smoky sweetness met the corn's salt and butter in perfect harmony. For families who had little, it was dessert, comfort, and memory all at once. Mothers made it by instinct, their hands moving with the wisdom of experience, no measurements needed. The scent of molasses melting into warm bread carried through the house like an embrace. It tasted of resilience, of laughter that found its way even into lean days. Some added milk or butter for richness, others ate it plain, spooning sweetness straight from the plate. It was proof that joy could be made from scarcity and that gratitude always found a way to rise, just like cornbread from an old cast-iron pan. Peanut butter and molasses on bread was a breakfast that tasted like invention and endurance. Long before grocery stores carried endless jars, families roasted peanuts by hand, grinding them with spoons or stones until smooth. Then came the molasses, dark, thick, and sweet, a little drizzle turning the mixture into gold. The spread was sticky, strong, and full of flavor that lingered. It clung to the bread, soaked into its edges, and carried a sweetness that never felt cheap. For children, it was a treat. For adults, it was fuel for the day ahead. This simple pairing spoke of thrift, love, and resourcefulness, the art of making joy from what was already there. It filled bellies without emptying wallets, a small triumph of flavor over circumstance. The smell of roasted peanuts mixed with syrupy sugar could turn any morning softer. It was breakfast that tasted like care, like work, like home. Every bite was balance, sweet meeting salt, need meeting creativity. Peanut butter and molasses on bread became a tradition not just for taste, but for what it meant. That even the humblest meal could carry dignity and delight. Cheese grits casserole was the Southern gift that made Christmas brunch feel complete. Grandparents mixed slow-cooked grits with butter, eggs, and a mountain of shredded cheese until the pot turned golden and glossy. Poured into a baking dish, it went into the oven to rise, the top forming a soft crust that bubbled at the edges. When it came out, the house filled with the scent of warmth and home. The casserole was creamy and rich, each spoonful smooth like velvet, with a hint of salt and sharp cheddar. It was shared at tables surrounded by cousins, friends, and faith. Served beside ham, sausage, or fried apples, it tied every plate together. Cheese grits casserole wasn't just food, it was comfort made tangible, the taste of Christmas morning and all its quiet joy. Even the leftovers felt like love reheated. The way it held heat long after leaving the oven made it the heart of every brunch table. Grandparents would scoop it proudly, watching butter melt into every golden layer. It was both humble and grand, a dish that felt like sunlight on a cold morning. Cheese grits casserole carried the story of the South, slow-cooked, soulful, and full of love that lingered in every bite.
Number 16, souse meat at breakfast. A cold jelly loaf made from a whole hog head simmered for hours with vinegar, bay leaves, and hot pepper until every scrap of meat fell from the bone and the natural gelatin set it into a firm block that could be sliced and eaten cold. Doctors looked at souse meat and saw cholesterol, sodium, and organ tissue pressed into a shape that belonged nowhere near a breakfast plate. The gelatin holding it together is pure collagen, the same protein now sold in expensive powder form as a joint and gut supplement. The vinegar in the brine aided digestion and helped preserve the meat without refrigeration. The slow simmer extracted minerals from the bone itself. A cold slice of sauce on a piece of bread with hot sauce was a high-protein, zero-waste breakfast that used every part of the animal the butcher would have thrown away. Nothing was purchased that did not have to be. No.
Fried ripe plantains brought a touch of Caribbean sweetness to Southern breakfasts, a flavor carried by migration and memory. Fully ripe plantains were sliced on the diagonal, their skins almost black to signal perfect sugar content. They were pan-fried in butter until their edges caramelized and their centers turned soft and custard-like. A sprinkle of brown sugar or a drizzle of cane syrup heightened the natural sweetness, making them irresistible alongside eggs or grits. Families cherished this dish for its tropical flair and the way it honored connections between African American and Caribbean kitchens. Grandparents recall how the scent of frying plantains would fill the house, a fragrance both exotic and familiar, tying generations to distant shores. Whether served alone as a treat or paired with savory dishes for contrast, fried ripe plantains turned an ordinary morning into something special. Their golden color and rich aroma still evoke memories of shared breakfasts and the enduring blend of cultures that shaped African American foodways. Field pea cakes were one of those breakfast recipes that reflected both creativity and frugality. Leftover field peas would be mashed and mixed with cornmeal, onion, and a touch of seasoning, then shaped into patties and fried until crisp. They were simple to prepare and stretched whatever little was left from dinner into the morning meal. For farming families, peas were easy to grow and store, making them a dependable staple. The patties were hearty enough to satisfy hunger and could be eaten plain or alongside bread, syrup, or even a bit of bacon when available. The texture was soft inside with a crunchy crust that made them appealing to both children and adults. Field pea cakes spoke to the ingenuity of cooks who made sure nothing went to waste. They were not just thrifty, but also delicious, proving that even the simplest ingredients could be turned into a breakfast worth remembering.
Number 17, fatback and fried apples. In the mountains of Virginia and the Carolinas, fatback and fried apples was a fall breakfast that cost almost nothing. You sliced fatback thin and fried it until the fat rendered. Then you dropped sliced apples into the same hot grease. The apples sizzled and softened, soaking up the pork flavor and caramelizing. A sprinkle of cinnamon if you had it. The plate was sweet and salty and rich, done in under 10 minutes. Apples cost 15 cents a pound in 1963. Fatback was cheaper because nobody else wanted it. The white strips of pure pork fat were what the butcher sold last, often for pennies because affluent customers had moved on to bacon. Black families and poor Appalachian families bought what was left and turned it into breakfast. Number 10, smoked herring and salt and crackers. Smoked herring was the cheapest fish a black household could buy in 1964, and a small wooden box of it could feed breakfast to 4 people for under a quarter. The whole salted herring came packed dry, stiff as a piece of leather, with the skin still on and the eyes still in. They had to soak in cold water overnight to pull the worst of the salt out, and most grandmothers changed the water at least once before bed. By morning, the fish had softened enough to pull apart easily with a fork. The flakes got piled onto a stack of saltine crackers, sometimes with a thin slice of raw yellow onion on top, sometimes with a single drop of hot sauce, and that was breakfast on a Tuesday or a Thursday. The flavor was sharp, smoky, and unforgettable, and the herring tradition traced straight back through the Great Migration to the coastal South, where black families had been salting and smoking fish for generations long before anyone called it soul food. The smoked herring on our grandmothers' tables in 1964 was the same fish their grandmothers had pulled from low-country waters 100 years earlier, and the recipe never needed writing down.
Red-eye gravy and biscuits gave breakfast a bold, bitter soul. Born from ham drippings and black coffee, it was thin, smoky, and sharp enough to wake you faster than any alarm. Grandparents poured the hot coffee into the greasy skillet, scraping the bottom to gather every bit of flavor. The smell hit first, strong, dark, and unmistakable. Fresh biscuits soaked it up like sponges, turning bitter into savory beauty. It was a meal for workers, for those who rose before dawn and needed fire in their bellies. Red-eye gravy did not pretend to be sweet or gentle. It was honest, intense, and unforgettable. Grandparents said it was a grown folks' breakfast, the kind that taught you to face the day head-on. The flavor was bold, a mix of smoke and bitterness that tasted like life itself, hard, sharp, but satisfying. Every bite carried stories of mornings spent in fields or factories, hands rough but hearts steady. It was more than a meal. It was morning courage in liquid form.
Number 1, the Saturday morning table itself. This is not a single dish. This is where all 24 came together. A table crowded with plates that did not match, glasses filled from a pitcher, chairs pulled in from the other room because there were always more people than seats. Everything on that table was cooked from memory by a woman who never wrote a recipe down in her life. She did not need to. Her hands knew, her eyes knew, the skillet knew, and when she sat down last, because she always sat down last, the table was already eating. That kitchen is quieter now. Some of those skillets sit in cabinets untouched. Some of those recipes left with her because nobody stood close enough, long enough to learn them. But the taste is still there, in the back of the mouth, in the part of the brain that holds Saturday mornings. It is still right there. Salmon croquettes sizzling in a cast iron skillet was the sound of a Saturday that belonged to your mother. She opened the can of pink salmon the night before, picking out every bone with her fingers while the house slept. By morning, the mixture was ready. Salmon, crumbled saltines, egg, diced onion, and black pepper, shaped into flat patties and laid into hot grease. The edges crisped golden, while the center stayed soft and flaky. Canned salmon cost about 30 cents in the 1950s, making it one of the few affordable proteins that stretched across a whole family. She served them over grits with hot sauce, and the combination of salt, smoke, and creamy corn held you through a full day of school. You never measured when you made them later. You poured until the color looked right, the way she taught you without ever saying a word. But yours never held together the same. Something in how she pressed them went with her when she stopped cooking.
Collard green and onion hash gave leafy greens a starring role, turning a traditional dinner side into a savory breakfast companion. Fresh collard greens were sliced thin and quickly sautéed with sweet onions, a little garlic, and a splash of vegetable broth until tender yet vibrant. The result was a smoky, nutrient-rich hash that paired beautifully with eggs, grits, or cornbread. Some families added diced potatoes for extra heartiness, while others seasoned with a pinch of red pepper flakes to wake up the taste buds. This dish reflected a deep appreciation for garden vegetables and the ingenuity of African-American cooks who brought dinner flavors to the morning table. Collard green and onion hash provided iron, vitamins, and a satisfying warmth that lasted through long days. Its quick preparation and bold taste made it a weekday favorite, while its connection to Southern tradition made it feel timeless, proving that breakfast could be as wholesome and flavorful as any evening meal. Scrapple slices were one of the most resourceful breakfasts older generations relied on, especially in regions where nothing from the pig went to waste. Scrapple mixed pork scraps with cornmeal and spices, forming a loaf that could be sliced and fried until crisp on the outside and soft on the inside. Grandparents cooked it in a hot skillet, letting each piece form that perfect golden crust that crackled slightly under the fork. It was savory, hearty, and deeply rooted in tradition, a dish born from the idea that every ingredient had value. Some families ate it plain, others added syrup or mustard, but no matter how it was served, scrapple had a distinctive flavor that stayed with you. It tasted like farm mornings, like smoke rising from cast iron pans, like a time when food came from skill rather than convenience. Children might turn up their noses at the idea today, but to those who grew up on it, scrapple was a breakfast that meant strength, thrift, and the comfort of knowing a meal would always be there. Even now, the memory of that sizzling sound brings people back to early mornings in small kitchens where tradition guided the skillet. Corn fritters with syrup were the kind of breakfast that could turn an ordinary morning into a celebration. Kernels of sweet corn, fresh from the cob or scraped from leftovers, were folded into a soft batter of flour, milk, and egg. The mixture dropped into hot grease with a hiss, frying until golden and crisp at the edges while staying tender inside. The smell of corn and sugar filled the kitchen, clinging to the air like joy. When stacked high and drizzled with syrup or honey, the fritters gleamed beneath the morning light, a feast for both eyes and stomach. Children devoured them fast, laughing through sticky fingers, while elders took slow, satisfied bites. The taste was summer captured in a skillet, sweet, warm, and familiar. Corn fritters were more than food. They were family-made edible, a recipe shaped by time and tenderness. Even in hard years when ingredients were scarce, there was always enough for a pan of these golden treasures. They were the taste of comfort in motion, sweet proof that happiness could still grow from humble hands and hot oil. Butter-browned toast with sugar and cinnamon turned the ordinary into something unforgettable. Slices of day-old bread were fried in butter until golden and crisp, the scent alone enough to make any morning brighter. A dusting of sugar and cinnamon melted into the warmth, forming a caramel-like layer that shimmered under the kitchen light. It was simple magic. No recipe, no fuss, just instinct and love. For children, it was a treat that felt like dessert before the day began. For mothers, it was a quick way to stretch breakfast when time and money were short. The toast crackled slightly when bitten, soft in the middle, sweet on the edges, and full of nostalgia. Some families served it with warm milk or cocoa, others enjoyed it on its own. Every bite was proof that simplicity, done right, could rival any fancy meal. It wasn't just toast. It was a memory baked in butter and kindness. Rice and molasses supper was one of the simplest meals, but also one of the most remembered. A pot of rice was inexpensive, filling, and always on hand, but paired with a drizzle of molasses, it turned into something sweet and sustaining. Sugar was too costly for everyday use, but molasses was affordable and sold in larger tins that seemed to last forever. Families poured it over steaming bowls of rice, letting the dark syrup seep into the grains until they gleamed. The taste was rich, almost smoky, with just enough sweetness to make children smile. It was often eaten at the end of the day when no meat could be spared, and it carried people through the night with enough strength to face the next morning. My grandmother told me rice and molasses was a treat disguised as necessity, proof that resourcefulness could soften the edge of scarcity. In the 1960s, when Black families were stretching every dollar, rice and molasses kept hunger at bay while still offering a touch of comfort. Simple, cheap, and unforgettable, it was a meal born of need but remembered with love. Caramel layer cake was the dessert that demanded patience and rewarded devotion. The caramel icing had to be stirred over low heat for what felt like forever, and the smell of sugar turning gold was pure heaven. One careless second, and it would burn. But when it came out right, it gleamed like amber. African American women guarded their caramel recipes like secrets, each one slightly different, perfected over decades of Christmas dinners. The cake itself was tender and buttery, but the icing was the soul of it, sweet, smoky, and just shy of bitter. Served on special occasions, it was a symbol of pride, proof that skill and care could turn a handful of ingredients into art. The first slice cut through the glossy top like glass, revealing soft layers that seemed to melt in the mouth. No factory-made dessert could ever match it. Caramel layer cake was love, labor, and legacy, all baked into one beautiful confection.
Number 18, leftover fried fish at breakfast. A piece of catfish or whiting, fried the night before, pulled from the icebox and eaten cold or reheated in the skillet alongside the morning eggs. The frying pan applied at every hour and reheated fried food at sunrise doubled the offense in the eyes of every nutrition chart printed after the 1970s. Reheated fried fish retains its protein and its omega-3 content. The cornmeal crust held its minerals. The fat from the original fry stabilized during cooling. A plate of leftover fish with grits and hot sauce was a high-protein, mineral-rich meal assembled in 5 minutes without a single new drop of cooking fat added. The cereal aisle had nothing that could compete with it.
Cathead biscuits with cane syrup earned their playful name from their impressive size, each biscuit as big as a cat's head. The dough was mixed by hand, using flour, lard, and buttermilk to create a texture both fluffy and sturdy enough to split and fill. Baked until golden brown, they emerged from the oven towering and fragrant. Grandparents remember serving them with thick drizzles of dark cane syrup or honey, a combination that balanced sweet and savory with every bite. These giant biscuits were a centerpiece of country breakfasts, capable of holding slices of fried ham or scrambled eggs without falling apart. Families loved how a single biscuit could satisfy even the hungriest farmhand, making them practical as well as indulgent. Their name sparked laughter and curiosity, ensuring they were always a conversation starter at the table. Today, the memory of cathead biscuits remains a warm reminder of big flavors, generous hearts, and mornings filled with the smell of baking bread. Red gravy with rice was a breakfast dish that combined economy with comfort in African American households. The gravy was made from tomatoes, onions, and seasoning, simmered until thick and poured over steaming rice. It was filling, affordable, and deeply satisfying, providing warmth and energy to carry through the day. For many families, rice was cheaper than bread and could be stretched to feed everyone, while tomatoes added both flavor and color. The dish was common across the South, where it became a daily staple for working people who needed hearty food before long hours of labor. Children often grew up with it as a familiar morning ritual, while adults valued its reliability and ease of preparation. Red gravy with rice was never fancy, but it symbolized resilience and the ability to make simple ingredients carry meaning. Though rarely served in breakfast form today, it was once a proud and practical tradition.
Number 19, blackstrap molasses milk. A tall glass of cold milk with 2 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses stirred until it turned dark and sweet. Mothers called it a tonic. Grandmothers said it built strong blood. They were not wrong. Blackstrap molasses contains more iron per tablespoon than a serving of spinach, and in communities where anemia was common and doctor visits rare, a glass every morning was folk medicine that worked. A jar of Grandma's molasses cost 35 cents in 1965. Combined with milk at 49 cents a half gallon, 2 weeks of morning drinks for under $1. Children drank it cold in summer, warm in winter. Some mothers added a raw egg and shook it like a milkshake. The taste was dark and mineral, almost like coffee for a child. No one calls it a superfood. No one puts it on a menu. But the iron it delivered kept Black children standing in classrooms where they were not always welcome. Number 12, liver mush, slices with hot coffee. Liver mush was the cheap North Carolina cousin of scrapple, and in Black households across the Piedmont, it carried the cold months from October through to March. The loaf came wrapped in waxy butcher paper for about 30 cents a pound in 1963, less than half the price of any cured pork on the same counter. It was ground pork liver mixed with stone ground cornmeal, dried sage, and plenty of black pepper, then chilled solid in a loaf pan overnight until it cut clean. 2 cold slices hit a dry pan first thing in the morning and crisped up dark brown on both sides in under 5 minutes, no extra grease needed. A thick slice on a piece of light bread with a smear of yellow mustard fed a grown man straight through to his lunch break, and the mug of strong black coffee beside it finished the meal off. Number 9, blackstrap molasses on a split biscuit. This was the breakfast your grandmother's grandmother knew. A woman in Tuskegee, Alabama, would split a hot biscuit in half, lay a smear of butter on each side, then pour a slow circle of blackstrap molasses over the top until the bread turned dark and glossy. Blackstrap molasses was the last boiling of sugar cane juice, the darkest and most bitter of the 3 grades, and it was the cheapest sweetener available to Black families in the rural South. A Department of Agriculture study in the 1890s found that fat salt pork, cornmeal, and molasses were the 3 staple foods in Black households around Tuskegee. 60 years later, in the 1950s, that had barely changed. Molasses was still there on the breakfast table. The flavor was strong and earthy, almost medicinal. Children who grew up eating it either loved it or learned to love it because there was nothing else sweet in the house. When refined sugar became cheap, molasses lost its place. But it had carried generations. Number 5, salt mackerel. A whole side of mackerel, preserved in heavy salt, bought from the store, wrapped in brown paper. It had to be soaked in water overnight to draw the salt out enough to eat. By morning, it was still firm, still deeply flavored, and ready for the skillet. Dredged in flour or cornmeal and fried until the skin turned crispy, it was served whole on a plate with grits on the side. The bones were small and thin, and you learned to eat around them, or you learned the hard way. Salt mackerel was a breakfast fish in Black households across the South long before anyone used the word brunch. It disappeared from most tables when fresh fish became easier to get and the salted kind stopped showing up at the neighborhood store. But for a generation of grandmothers, Saturday morning without fried fish was a Saturday morning that had not really started yet. Red-eye gravy happened when country ham met black coffee in a hot skillet, and if that sounds strange, you were not raised in the right kitchen. After frying a slice of dry-cured ham, the salty kind from a whole leg hanging in the smokehouse, your mother poured leftover coffee straight into the pan. The drippings and coffee hissed into a thin, dark gravy with a reddish eye of fat floating in the center. She spooned it over grits, laid the ham alongside, and set the plate down without ceremony. In the 1950s, country ham was common in Black Southern households because many families still cured their own hogs. The gravy used what would otherwise be thrown out drippings and the last inch of morning coffee. After church on Sunday, when the whole family crowded the kitchen, that gravy was the first thing gone from the stove. It could not be saved or reheated. It only existed between the skillet and the plate, and then it was gone.
Molasses oatmeal filled kitchens with the deep aroma of blackstrap sweetness, offering an iron-rich start that was both frugal and indulgent. Old-fashioned oats simmered slowly in milk or water until creamy, then received a generous spoonful of thick sorghum or blackstrap molasses. The dark syrup melted into the oats, tinting them a warm brown and adding a flavor both smoky and sweet. Many families used molasses not only for its taste, but also for its mineral strength, a natural source of iron and energy. Some sprinkled chopped nuts or sliced bananas on top for extra texture, while others added a pinch of cinnamon for gentle spice. Molasses oatmeal spoke to a time when nourishment and economy were equally important, turning a humble grain into a breakfast that felt rich and sustaining. It remained a quiet favorite of African American households, a reminder that even the simplest bowls could carry history, health, and the comforting weight of tradition with every spoonful. Coffee milk for kids was one of those small morning rituals that made children feel grown, even though the drink was mostly warm milk with only a tiny splash of coffee. Parents and grandparents mixed it carefully, just enough coffee to tint the milk a light tan and add the faintest whisper of that roasted smell adults relied on to start their day. It was soothing, warm, and familiar. The kind of drink that made sleepy children perk up before school without giving them the full strength of adult coffee. Many African American households use this as a way to include children in the morning rhythm, letting them feel part of the adult world while still keeping things gentle. The taste was mild and slightly sweet, especially when a bit of sugar was added, and it had a comforting creaminess that stuck with you long after the cup was empty. The mornings felt quieter back then, slower, filled with the soft sounds of spoons stirring and radios humming low in the background. Coffee milk was not just a drink, it was a moment, a shared start to the day that made you feel loved and included. Even now, the memory of that warm cup brings people back to kitchens filled with steam, conversation, and the steady comfort of family. Homemade cane syrup drizzle was a sweet gift born from patience and persistence. Families grew sugar cane, harvested it by hand, and boiled it down slowly over open fires until it turned into thick golden syrup. The smell was deep and earthy, like caramel and smoke mixed together. When poured warm over flapjacks or grits, it shone like amber in the morning light. It was sticky, rich, and filled with flavor that store-bought sugar never had. Making syrup was a community task. Neighbors gathered to grind cane, stir kettles, and laugh through the steam. The first taste, still hot from the pot, was pure reward. Each jar held not just sweetness, but pride, the result of long days and shared hands. It was used sparingly, stretched carefully, and treasured until the next harvest. Over pancakes, biscuits, or cornbread, that drizzle turned plain food into a celebration. Every drop reminded folks of the land that gave it and the love that made it. Oatmeal with evaporated milk and brown sugar transformed something simple into something sacred. Oats simmered low and slow, thickening patiently in a pot that never left the stove's side. When ready, the steam rose in soft ribbons, carrying the scent of sweetness and comfort. A drizzle of creamy evaporated milk gave it richness, turning each spoonful velvety smooth, while brown sugar melted into swirls of caramel warmth. It was breakfast that hugged you back, a bowl of goodness that filled empty stomachs and softened hard mornings. Mothers stirred with steady hands, tasting and adjusting until it was just right. For children, it was sweetness before school. For adults, it was strength before work. It wasn't flashy or fancy, but it was full of love, the kind you could taste. On cold mornings, it kept families warm long before the sun rose high. Even decades later, one whiff of oats and sugar could bring back the sound of spoons clinking, the sight of a crowded table, and the memory of love poured straight from a tin of milk. Leftover grit cakes turned yesterday's breakfast into today's miracle. When the morning rush was over and the pot of grits sat cold, mothers would scoop what was left into a pan, chill it, then slice it thick by dawn. Those slices were fried in bacon grease until crisp outside and tender within. What started as thrift became tradition, proof that waste had no place in a careful home. Served with eggs or syrup, grit cakes were hearty, filling, and familiar. Their golden crust and soft middle carried the taste of patience and practicality. No one complained about eating them again. In fact, most looked forward to it. They were the kind of food that spoke softly of care, of making something new without needing anything extra. Even the smell of frying grits could bring everyone to the table fast. Leftover grit cakes were a reminder that the best meals are often the simplest ones, built from what was already enough. Cabbage and ham hock stew was a breakfast that filled both stomachs and spirits. Cabbage, inexpensive and abundant, was simmered with ham hocks until tender and flavorful. The broth became rich with the smoky, salty essence of the ham, while the cabbage absorbed every bit of taste. Potatoes, onions, or other vegetables were sometimes added to stretch the stew further, making it both practical and hearty. Families ate it hot in the morning, ensuring they had enough fuel for long days in the fields or at work. The dish was economical, making use of inexpensive cuts of meat that might otherwise be overlooked. Yet it carried pride too, as it transformed humble ingredients into something comforting and sustaining. Cabbage and ham hock stew showed the ingenuity of African American cooks who knew how to bring depth of flavor from even the simplest foods. Though forgotten by many, it was once a breakfast that symbolized strength and tradition.
Number 25, salt pork and gravy over biscuits. A slab of salt-cured pork belly simmered in a skillet until the fat rendered out. Then flour stirred into the drippings to make a thick white gravy poured over split biscuits. Doctors put salt pork at the top of the list. Sodium, saturated fat, cured meat. Every dietary guideline published after 1970 treated it like poison on a plate. Salt pork is slow-rendered collagen and fat that delivers concentrated energy in a small portion. The gravy made from its drippings carries fat-soluble nutrients into the biscuit, and the salt itself was doing real work in bodies that sweated through manual labor before the sun came up. A field hand, burning 4,000 calories before noon, needed sodium replacement, not restriction. The biscuit underneath provided the starch. The gravy provided the fuel. The whole plate cost almost nothing and held a working body upright until the midday meal. The doctors were writing guidelines for office workers. The kitchen was feeding people who worked the land.
Molasses pulled bread brought a gentle sweetness to early mornings and delighted children who loved to tear off soft, sticky pieces while the loaf was still warm. The yeast dough was enriched with sorghum or blackstrap molasses, giving it a rich color and a deep, caramel-like flavor. After a slow rise, it was baked until the crust turned dark and slightly chewy, while the inside stayed moist and tender. Families treasured this bread because it required little more than patience and a steady hand, yet the reward was a fragrant loaf that could feed many. Grandparents remember how the scent of molasses would drift through the house, promising a breakfast that felt like a celebration even on an ordinary day. Slices were enjoyed plain, toasted or slathered with butter, making every bite a reminder of how sweet life could be when shared at the family table. Molasses pull bread remains a symbol of care and time, proof that the simplest ingredients can create the most lasting memories. Cornbread and buttermilk bowl was one of the simplest and most enduring breakfasts in African American homes. Leftover cornbread would be crumbled into a bowl, then covered with cold buttermilk until it softened. The result was tangy, filling, and quick to prepare, making it perfect for mornings when time and money were both scarce. Families valued it because it used ingredients already on hand, stretching resources without requiring anything extra. Children often found it refreshing in the summer heat, while adults relied on its heartiness to last through long days. It was a meal that carried history, reflecting the agricultural roots of communities where corn and dairy were staples. The dish required no fancy preparation, only the wisdom of turning leftovers into something nourishing. Though rarely eaten today, cornbread and buttermilk bowls were once a daily ritual that spoke to both thrift and tradition.
Number 14, spoon bread. Edna Lewis, the legendary black chef from Freetown, Virginia, wrote about loving spoon bread as a child. It wasn't bread at all, but a souffle made from cornmeal, milk and butter, eggs, beaten until light and baked until it puffed golden and trembling. You ate it with the spoon because it was too soft to slice. In the 1960s, spoon bread was a Sunday morning dish in Virginia and the Piedmont. It required more eggs than most breakfasts, making it special. But seniors who kept chickens had eggs every day, and for them, spoon bread was an ordinary Tuesday. Cornmeal cost pennies. Eggs came from the yard. The technique was everything. You had to beat the batter long enough to incorporate air and know your oven well enough to pull it at the right moment. Grandmothers who made spoon bread never wrote the recipe down because the recipe was in their hands. Number 22, sunrise skillet grits with pan drippings. The Sunrise Kitchen in a 1960s soul food household ran on one rhythm, and grits with pan drippings was its first sound. Water went into the heavy pot before anyone else was awake. Once it rolled, a slow handful of stone, ground white grits got stirred in with a long wooden spoon, and the pot sat at the back of the stove for almost an hour. Right before plating, a tablespoon of bacon drippings from the coffee can on the counter went straight into the bowl. That spoonful turned a plain breakfast into something that tasted like the meat from the night before, without costing 1 extra cent. The bowl came to the table with the rim of the spoon already buried, and most people did not look up until the bowl was clean. That spoonful of saved drippings is what we still call the soul of soul food, one quiet ingredient carrying the memory of every meal that came before it. Number 14, canned mackerel and eggs. This was the breakfast that cost 19 cents and fed a whole family. A woman in Savannah, Georgia, would open a can of mackerel, drain it, flake it with a fork, and scramble it into eggs with diced onion and black pepper. She fried the mixture in a skillet and served it on a plate with grits or a biscuit on the side. Canned mackerel was even cheaper than canned salmon in the 1950s. It had a stronger flavor, a fishier bite, but mixed into eggs, it mellowed out into something savory and filling. The can sat on the shelf for months. It required no refrigeration. It was protein that waited for you. This was a breakfast for the first of the month and the last of the month and every morning in between when the icebox was bare. Your grandmother did not choose canned fish because she liked it better than fresh. She chose it because it was always there. Number 19, sugared rice. Leftover white rice from the night before, heated in a pot with a pour of canned milk, a lump of butter, and sugar stirred in until it dissolved, served warm in a bowl, eaten with a spoon. It was closer to a pudding than a proper breakfast, and children loved it for exactly that reason. There was no recipe. The sweetness depended on who was cooking and who was eating. A grandmother making sugared rice for a small child added more. For a grown man heading out the door, less. The rice was already cooked, so the whole thing took 5 minutes. It was what happened when there was nothing else in the kitchen but yesterday's rice and the will to make it into something worth sitting down for. But there was bread and there was sugar. Your mother took a slice of white bread, spread it with margarine, and sprinkled sugar across the top until it sparkled. That was breakfast. She handed it to you with a glass of water or milk if the milkman had come, and you ate it standing because the table was crowded with yesterday's dishes. It cost almost nothing. It tasted like a secret your family kept between the walls of that kitchen. In the 1950s, when black households stretched every dollar past its breaking point, sugar bread stood between a child and an empty stomach before school. Nobody talked about it outside the house. You remember the crunch of those crystals against soft bread, and you remember her hands folding the slice in half so it would last the walk to the bus stop. She made hunger taste sweet. Nobody has done that since.
Rice pudding. Hot cereal turned yesterday's pot of rice into a creamy, comforting breakfast that stretched ingredients and budgets with ease. Cold cooked rice was stirred into a saucepan of warm milk, sugar, and a hint of vanilla, then simmered until it thickened to a soothing porridge. A dusting of nutmeg or cinnamon brought gentle spice, while some families added raisins or chopped pecans for extra flavor. African-American cooks valued this dish for its thrift and versatility, using leftover rice from dinner to create something entirely new the next morning. Served in deep bowls with a pat of butter melting on top, it filled the house with a cozy aroma that made chilly mornings feel welcoming. Children loved its gentle sweetness, and parents appreciated how quickly it came together while providing hearty nourishment. Rice pudding. Hot cereal stood as a quiet reminder that resourcefulness and flavor could walk hand in hand, proving that simple ingredients could become a treasured morning ritual. Rice and raisins with butter was the kind of breakfast that felt like a treat, even though it came from the most basic pantry ingredients a household always had on hand. Long before sugary cereal brands took over the shelves, many families started their day with a warm bowl of rice simmered until soft and mixed with sweet raisins that plumped in the heat. A pat of butter melted over the top, coating each grain and adding richness that made the dish feel far more indulgent than its low cost suggested. It was warm, steady, and comforting, the kind of breakfast that felt like a hug before school or chores. Grandparents made it because rice was cheap, raisins lasted forever in a jar, and butter brought everything together in a way that tasted wholesome and familiar. Some added a sprinkle of sugar, others a dash of cinnamon, but most kept it simple, letting the steam rise like a quiet morning ritual. The flavor was gentle, the sweetness mild, and the bowl always seemed to disappear faster than expected. For many families, this dish was tied to winter mornings, cold floors, and the feeling of being cared for before the day even started. Even today, people who grew up with rice and raisins remember the way it filled the house with warmth and made them feel ready for anything. Fried apples were proof that nothing went to waste. Bruised or aging fruit was sliced thin, tossed with butter and sugar, and cooked down until golden and soft. The smell alone could make a house feel full. It was breakfast, dessert, and comfort all at once. The syrup that formed in the pan was thick and caramel-like, perfect for spooning over biscuits or toast. Every family had their way. Some added cinnamon, others just a squeeze of lemon. But all shared the same goal: make something sweet from what was left. Fried apples turned the ordinary into a feast. The sizzle of butter hitting the pan meant warmth was coming soon. It was the sound of morning, of care and motion. Some cooks stirred them until they nearly melted. Others left them in tender slices, soft but still holding shape. No matter how they came, they carried the same message, that even what looked too far gone could still bring joy. On quiet mornings, a single skillet of fried apples could make a kitchen feel alive again, filling it with sweetness, scent, and love that lingered long after the plates were clean. Stewed prunes with sugar and cloves were the forgotten sweetness of frugal mornings. Dried prunes simmered in a pot of water, softening until they glistened like jewels. A spoon of sugar and a dash of clove turned them fragrant and tender, filling the room with a warm, spiced scent. They were spooned over toast, oats, or eaten alone as a gentle start to the day. Once considered medicine for the body, they became comfort for the heart. Poor families used them because they lasted forever and cost next to nothing, yet tasted like a treat. Each soft bite was nostalgia, a reminder of careful hands that made something lovely out of little. The deep purple syrup they left behind was poured over pancakes or biscuits so that nothing went to waste. This dish wasn't about indulgence. It was about intention, about turning patience and time into sweetness. For many, stewed prunes were a quiet memory of grandparents' kitchens, of simpler days when flavor came from the heart, not the store. Red drink, Juneteenth punch, flowed like a symbol of freedom and memory at community celebrations marking emancipation. Made from hibiscus petals or bright strawberries steeped into a deep crimson infusion, the drink stood for resilience and the blood of those who fought for liberation. Families would gather in churchyards and town squares, pouring the sweet, tangy liquid into simple cups while music and laughter filled the warm June air. Children chased each other between picnic tables as elders told the story of the first Juneteenth, reminding everyone of the hard-won joy behind the holiday. The punch often carried a gentle spice from cloves or ginger, offering a flavor both refreshing and layered, much like the history it honored. Preparing the drink was as important as drinking it, with women and men alike contributing fruit, sugar, and labor to the cause. Though some communities still keep the tradition alive, many younger generations have never tasted the vibrant red drink that once defined a day of remembrance and celebration. Molasses-dipped apples were a simple but cherished breakfast treat that blended sweetness with thrift. Apples would be peeled, sliced, and simmered in thick molasses until tender and glossy. The result was both rich and comforting, often eaten alongside bread or biscuits for a balanced plate. Molasses was affordable and more accessible than refined sugar, making it a staple in many African American homes. Pairing it with apples, which were plentiful during the season, stretched the sweetness into something filling and satisfying. Children especially loved this dish, as it was one of the few ways to enjoy something sweet in the morning without the expense of store-bought goods. Adults valued it as an easy way to prepare fruit in a form that lasted longer. Molasses-dipped apples carried both comfort and practicality, standing as proof that even humble ingredients could bring warmth and joy to the table.
Number 15, country ham and red-eye gravy. A thick slice of dry-cured country ham, fried in a skillet, then deglazed with black coffee to make the gravy. The sodium in country ham is extreme by modern standards. It was salt-cured for months, sometimes over a year, and a single slice could carry more sodium than a doctor wanted a patient to consume in an entire day. Country ham is fermented. The long curing process breaks down proteins into amino acids and creates compounds similar to those found in aged cheese and miso, foods that are now praised for gut health. The red-eye gravy, made from nothing but ham drippings and coffee, is pure umami. No flour, no cream, no additives. A thin slice of ham with that gravy spooned over grits was not the sodium bomb the Chos made it look like. It was a fermented food eaten in small portions by people who sweated through their mornings.
Hot water cornbread cakes were the kind of breakfast that filled kitchens with warmth before the sun even cleared the trees. Cornmeal was mixed with boiling water until it formed a thick batter that could be shaped into small patties by hand. Each cake hissed as it touched the hot skillet, the edges browning to a perfect crisp, while the center stayed soft and tender. Families loved these because they required only a few pantry staples, yet tasted like a feast when served with butter or a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandparents remember the sound of sizzling cakes as a gentle morning alarm, calling everyone to the table. These cakes were hearty enough to keep field workers energized through the day and simple enough for children to help prepare. Whether eaten plain or split open to cradle a slice of fried fish from the night before, hot water cornbread cakes proved that true comfort often comes from the simplest ingredients and a steady hand at the skillet. Cane syrup biscuits were a breakfast treat that balanced simplicity with pure comfort. Biscuits were baked fresh, sometimes from scratch and sometimes from canned dough, then served with thick cane syrup poured generously over the top. The syrup was dark, sweet, and sticky, a regional staple that families could rely on when sugar and jams were too costly. The combination of flaky bread and syrup was both filling and indulgent, giving mornings a sense of celebration, even during lean times. For children, it was a sweet start to the day that felt like dessert, while adults valued it as quick fuel before work. Cane syrup itself was a treasured pantry item, often stored in large tins and used sparingly to stretch across weeks. Biscuits with cane syrup were not just food, but a reminder of family kitchens and the traditions that bound them together. Today, it is rarely seen, but it once carried both joy and survival in every bite.
Number 21, sawmill gravy and biscuits. The name came from lumber camps, where cooks fed crews for pennies. You rendered salt pork in a skillet, stirred flour into the drippings until golden, then poured in milk and scraped the bottom until it thickened into a pale, peppery gravy. Pour that over a split biscuit, and you had breakfast that stuck to your ribs until supper. In black households across the rural South, sawmill gravy was the breakfast that appeared when there was not any meat for the plate. The gravy was the meat course, flavored with drippings that gave it a richness disguising how little pork was involved. Grandmothers had been making biscuits by feel for decades, cutting lard into flour with their fingers, adding buttermilk until the dough felt right. Biscuits in 12 minutes, gravy in 8, a full breakfast for 5 people, less than 30 cents. Number 17, hoe cakes cooked on the stove lid. The oldest breakfast in the soul food canon was a flat round of cornmeal cooked right on the hot iron, and it was still on tables in 1965. A cup of stone ground cornmeal, a little salt, and boiling water were the only ingredients. The dough patted out flat between 2 palms, then went straight onto a greased lid or the back of a heavy iron griddle. 3 or 4 minutes aside and the edges were crisp, the middle still tender. Working families ate them split with a smear of lard and a drizzle of cane syrup, and field hands carried the extras wrapped in a piece of newspaper to eat at mid-morning break. Hoe cakes trace back centuries in Black cooking, and almost every grandmother in the rural South still made them at least once a week.
Homemade sausage patties filled the house with a smell that felt like joy itself. Grandparents seasoned ground pork with sage, pepper, and salt, mixing it slow by hand. They shaped the meat into patties and laid them in a hot skillet, the sizzle echoing through the kitchen. The grease popped, the air thick with spice and smoke. Each patty browned perfectly, crisp on the edges, tender inside. Served beside biscuits or grits, they became the centerpiece of Christmas breakfast. The flavor was warm and full-bodied, carrying a balance of salt and heat that felt like comfort itself. These sausages didn't come from a store. They came from love, from knowledge passed down through generations. Families sat close, plates piled high, laughter ringing through the air. Homemade sausage patties weren't just breakfast. They were the sound and smell of home on Christmas morning.
Number 9, cheese eggs. Eggs cracked into a bowl, beaten with a fork, and poured into a buttered skillet over low heat. As the curds began to form, slices of American cheese were folded in and stirred slowly until the cheese melted into the eggs, turning them creamy, yellow, and stretchy in a way that plain scrambled eggs could never manage. The secret was low heat and patience. High heat made the eggs rubbery and the cheese greasy. A grandmother who made cheese eggs stood at the stove and stirred the whole time, never walking away, never rushing the process. The result was a pile of soft golden curds, rich enough to eat with nothing else on the plate. Children asked for cheese eggs by name. It was the one breakfast they never had to be told twice to finish. Butter was for people who could afford it. In the 1950s, most black kitchens in the South ran on lard, rendered hog fat, white and smooth, scooped from a tin near the stove. Biscuits made with lard came out flakier and lighter than butter ever allowed, with a crumb that shattered when you pulled them apart. The lard cut into flour with salt and baking powder, bound with just enough buttermilk to hold. They baked fast in a hot oven, rising tall in the cast iron pan. Split open and filled with homemade jelly, muscadine, fig, or whatever fruit was put up the summer before, they vanished from the table first. The jelly was its own labor, cooked down with sugar until it set thick enough to hold a spoon upright. Together, the biscuit and jelly represented hours compressed into one bite. The hog butchering, the lard rendering, the fruit picking, the jar sealing, all gone in 3 seconds, all done by hands that never called it hard.
Buttered hominy with bacon brought a smoky, buttery aroma to African-American breakfast tables of the 1970s, turning a humble grain into something rich and satisfying. White hominy kernels were simmered until tender, then sautéed in a heavy skillet with generous pats of butter. Crumbled strips of crisp bacon were folded in at the end, their savory fat blending with the buttery corn for layers of flavor. Some cooks added a sprinkle of black pepper or a pinch of red pepper flakes to deepen the taste, while others stirred in chopped green onions for brightness. Served alongside scrambled eggs or spooned over fresh cornbread, it offered hearty comfort that stuck with you through the morning. Buttered hominy with bacon celebrated both farm tradition and kitchen creativity, honoring a food once central to Native American diets and embraced by Southern cooks. Each bite carried the essence of smoky bacon and sweet corn, proving that simple, affordable ingredients could create a breakfast that felt luxurious without being complicated or costly. Fried salmon patties for breakfast might seem unusual today, but for many African-American families in the 60s and 70s, canned salmon was a dependable pantry staple that worked for any meal of the day. Grandparents mixed the salmon with breadcrumbs, onions, and seasoning, shaping it into patties that sizzled in the skillet until crisp. The smell filled the kitchen with something hearty and inviting, a bold start to the morning that made you feel ready for whatever the day demanded. Served with grits or biscuits, the patties tasted rich and satisfying, proof that canned ingredients could create meals full of flavor and comfort. Salmon was not expensive, but it felt special, which made breakfast feel special too. Children grew used to that savory taste long before they ever tried a restaurant version. Fried salmon patties were practical, filling, and unforgettable, a reminder of how creativity in the kitchen shaped so many childhood mornings. Wild berry dumplings were a breakfast that came directly from the land. Foraged berries like blackberries, blueberries, or mulberries were gathered in the early morning, often by children who knew where the best patches grew. The berries were simmered into a sweet syrup, and then simple dumplings made from flour and water were dropped into the pot. As they cooked, the dumplings soaked up the berry flavor, becoming plump, soft, and comforting. This was not a dish you would find in restaurants, but one that carried the taste of summer mornings in rural communities. It was affordable, relying only on what nature provided and a handful of pantry staples. Families looked forward to it during berry season, enjoying a breakfast that blended sweetness and tradition. The dumplings were eaten straight from bowls, sometimes with a little milk poured over the top to stretch the meal further. Wild berry dumplings were proof that even foraged food could feel like a feast. Fried apples with cinnamon turned ordinary mornings into something golden. Apples were peeled, sliced, and tossed into a skillet of sizzling butter and sugar, the scent filling the air with warmth and memory. A dash of cinnamon brought comfort that felt like a hug. The edges of the apples caramelized into sweetness, soft inside but crisp at the tips. Served beside hot biscuits or bacon, they were a treat that tasted like home. Poor families made them year-round, using bruised apples that still had life left in them. It was the kind of food that made children run to the table, spoons clinking against plates. Fried apples taught that nothing good should go to waste. Every soft slice carried history, care, and joy in equal measure. It was breakfast made from patience, the sweetness of survival turned into comfort on a plate. Buttermilk and cornbread in a glass was a Southern comfort meant for hot mornings and tired hearts. Crumbled cornbread was dropped into cold buttermilk until it softened just right, a balance between spoon and sip. The mix was cool, tangy, and filling, enough to make a meal out of yesterday's bread. Some added salt or a touch of pepper for sharpness, while others left it plain, letting the buttermilk's bite speak for itself. It was food that required no heat, no hurry, and no waste. A quiet answer to long summer days. Farmers ate it before heading to the fields. Elders took it on porches with a sigh of satisfaction. It was simple food, yes, but it was deeply personal, connecting generations through shared hunger and gratitude. Children learned early to love it, not for sweetness, but for how it cooled the body and calmed the soul. It was the taste of peace after hard work, the sound of spoons clinking in heavy glasses. Buttermilk and cornbread in a glass reminded folks that true comfort did not come from riches, but from resourcefulness and rhythm, the kind passed down through every Southern kitchen that ever cared. Liver pudding with cornbread was a breakfast that made use of both thrift and tradition. Liver pudding, made from ground pork liver mixed with spices and grain, was sliced and fried until warm and fragrant. Served alongside crumbled cornbread, it created a dish that was hearty, filling, and economical. Though the flavor was bold, it was respected as a nutritious way to stretch meat and ensure nothing went to waste. African American kitchens relied on dishes like this to feed large families affordably, making liver pudding a familiar sight at the morning table. The pairing with cornbread added comfort and balance, giving a soft texture to go with the savory richness of the pudding. For many, this dish was a reminder of resilience and resourcefulness. Though it is rarely prepared today, liver pudding with cornbread once carried both pride and practicality in every bite.
Number 22, hoe cakes cooked in lard, cornmeal mixed with water and a pinch of salt, shaped by hand into flat cakes and fried in a skillet of hot lard until both sides turn golden brown and the edges crisped. The name came from field workers who cooked them on the flat blade of a hoe over an open fire. Nutritionists dismissed hoe cakes as empty carbohydrates fried in animal fat, the worst combination on every chart they printed. Cornmeal is a whole grain. The lard carried vitamins D and K that the body cannot make on its own, and the frying created a slow digesting crust that released energy gradually instead of spiking blood sugar the way a dry piece of toast would. A stack of hoe cakes held a person from dawn through a full morning of work. The meal cost almost nothing, required no oven, and needed exactly one skillet. The simplicity was the design.
Carolina Gold rice cakes gave new life to leftover grains and turned yesterday's supper into a crisp morning treat. Cold rice was mixed with a little flour, a pinch of salt, and enough fresh egg to bind it together before being shaped into small patties. Each cake hissed as it met the hot cast iron skillet, forming a golden crust that crackled with every bite. The inside stayed soft and nutty, a reminder of the prized Carolina Gold variety once grown across the coastal South. Families enjoyed these cakes with a drizzle of cane syrup or a spoonful of stewed fruit, creating a breakfast that felt both thrifty and indulgent. Grandparents remember how the aroma of frying rice cakes filled the house, and how children would sneak one from the pan before the rest were served. These cakes were proof that nothing from yesterday's meal ever went to waste, and that a simple handful of ingredients could deliver a breakfast as memorable as any feast. Hogshead hash was a breakfast that spoke to the no-waste mentality of African American cooking traditions that valued resourcefulness and respect for food. When a hog was butchered, nothing was left unused, and the head provided meat that could be stewed, chopped, seasoned, and fried into hearty dishes. Families would mix the shredded meat with potatoes, onions, and sometimes peppers. Then cook it together in a skillet until browned, crispy, and richly flavored. The flavor was intense, smoky, and savory, and it filled the house with a smell that lingered long after breakfast was finished. It was not just food, but a reminder of how creativity and resourcefulness made survival possible in communities where every scrap mattered. Children grew up eating it without complaint because it was hearty, flavorful, and kept them full through school, farm work, or chores. Adults relied on it as a way to honor the animal by using every part of it, ensuring nothing went to waste. Though hog's head hash has nearly vanished from today's kitchens, it once stood as a powerful symbol of resilience, thrift, and respect for tradition that sustained families.
Number 25, one egg stretched 5 ways. In a household where 7 people needed breakfast and the icebox held 3 eggs, a mother in Birmingham cracked 1 egg into leftover rice, stirred it through, then fried the whole thing in bacon grease until the rice turned golden and the egg disappeared into every grain. Other mothers scrambled 1 egg into a pot of grits, letting the heat set it into thin ribbons of protein hiding in plain sight. Some beat an egg into flour and water to make a thin pancake that covered a plate and fooled a child into thinking they had gotten their fair share. In 1962, a dozen eggs cost 54 cents. Each egg was less than 5 cents. 5 cents between a child eating protein and a child eating nothing. Generations of Black mothers did not have cookbooks for this. They had arithmetic and love, and those 2 things could make 1 egg feel like a feast. Number 15, souse meat on saltine crackers. Souse, also called hog head cheese, was the breakfast meat of working people who could not afford bacon. A hog's head got simmered for hours with vinegar, peppers, and salt. Then the cooked meat was packed tight into a loaf pan and chilled until it sliced like jelly. 2 cold slices on a stack of saltine crackers made a breakfast that was salty, tangy, and filling enough for a morning shift. A small loaf cost about 35 cents in a Black neighborhood grocery, and it lasted 4 to 5 mornings if the family was careful with the slicing.
Field pea and rice hash turned a simple pot of peas into a hearty breakfast that fueled long days with ease. Black-eyed peas were simmered with onions, garlic, and a little smoked meat until tender, then spooned generously over steaming white rice. The flavors melded into a comforting bowl of earthy beans and fluffy grains that filled stomachs and lifted spirits. In the 1970s, this dish connected generations, recalling the Hoppin' John traditions of New Year's Day, while serving as an everyday morning staple in many African-American homes. Some families stirred in hot peppers for a gentle heat, while others finished with a drizzle of pepper vinegar for brightness. Field pea and rice hash proved that a few inexpensive ingredients could yield both nourishment and rich flavor, keeping families strong and satisfied. It celebrated agricultural roots and the creativity of cooks who understood that true comfort comes from a well-seasoned pot and the love shared around the breakfast table.
Number 12, oatmeal with canned milk, not instant oats, not the kind in a packet with freeze-dried fruit. This was the long cooking oatmeal, the kind that stuck to the spoon and stuck to your ribs and took patience to do right. It cooked on the stove for 20 minutes or more, stirred occasionally so it did not scorch on the bottom. Served in a deep bowl with a pour of a pet milk or carnation, a lump of butter, and sugar stirred in until it dissolved. The canned milk gave it a richness that regular milk could not match, something almost caramel in flavor when it hit the hot oats. This was not health food. This was a grandmother making sure you were not hungry until dinner. That was her version of nutrition. You had to wait for the frost. That was the rule with persimmons. Pick them too early and they would turn your mouth inside out with a bitterness so sharp it felt like chewing cotton. But after the first hard frost, the fruit dropped from the trees soft, orange, and heavy with sugar. The pulp was pressed through a sieve, then folded into batter with flour, cinnamon, nutmeg, and buttermilk. It baked into a dense, dark loaf that smelled like fall had walked into the kitchen. In the 1950s, persimmon trees grew wild across the Black rural South, and the bread was seasonal. You ate it in October or not at all. It could not be rushed. The fruit, decided when it was ready, and you learned to wait. That patience was part of the recipe, same as the cinnamon. Most of those trees are gone now, cut for developments or left to rot in yards where nobody remembers what they are.
Brown sugar sweet grits offered a playful twist on the classic savory staple, transforming stone-ground corn into a kid-friendly morning treat. Grits were cooked slowly in milk or water until creamy, then stirred with butter and a generous spoonful of dark brown sugar. The sugar melted into the hot grains, creating a caramel-like sweetness that balanced the subtle corn flavor. Families sometimes added raisins, sliced bananas, or a sprinkle of cinnamon for extra indulgence, while others enjoyed the simple pairing of butter and sugar alone. This sweet version of grits became popular in households where children preferred a hint of dessert for breakfast, yet adults appreciated its nourishing heartiness. Brown sugar sweet grits demonstrated how one ingredient could shift from savory to sweet with a few thoughtful touches, proving that a Southern classic could adapt to changing tastes while staying rooted in tradition and comfort. Each steaming bowl brought smiles to the table and warmth that lingered long after the meal. Potato cakes from leftover mash were the kind of breakfast that proved nothing in the kitchen ever had to be thrown away. Grandparents mixed cold mashed potatoes with flour or cornmeal, shaping the mixture into patties that fried beautifully in a hot skillet. The outside crisped into a golden crust, while the inside stayed soft, warm, and comforting. It was a thrifty breakfast that used leftovers creatively and fed everyone well without costing anything extra. The cakes were often served plain, sometimes with syrup, and sometimes with butter melting across the top. They tasted like resourcefulness, like making the most of what you had, like the kind of wisdom passed down quietly from generation to generation. Even today, people remember those potato cakes as a breakfast that felt both humble and full of heart. Leftover sweet potato hash was the Southern way of turning thrift into beauty. Soft cubes of roasted sweet potato were tossed into a skillet with chopped onions and a spoonful of pork grease. The sizzle came fast, filling the air with a scent both smoky and sweet. The edges crisped, the onions caramelized, and the pan came alive with color and comfort. What had been last night's side dish became the star of a brand new morning. Every forkful carried warmth, depth, and memory, proof that nothing good ever truly went to waste. The sweetness of the potatoes balanced the salt of the grease, a dance of flavors born from simplicity. It was food made with wisdom, where nothing was thrown away and everything was cherished. Families served it beside eggs or biscuits, or just ate it straight from the pan. It was humble but proud, a dish that spoke softly of care and resourcefulness. In every bite was a reminder that the best meals were not about what you had, but about how you used it. Sweet potato hash was survival turned soulful, and no one left the table hungry. Hot cocoa made from cocoa powder and evaporated milk was more than a drink. It was love in liquid form. There were no instant mixes or shortcuts, just cocoa powder whisked into sugar, milk and water over a patient flame. Mothers stood at the stove, stirring slowly so it would never scorch, their hands steady and sure. The result was a velvety, rich chocolate that hugged the soul. Evaporated milk gave it depth, a creamy warmth that lingered with every sip. On winter mornings, this was the kind of comfort that thawed both fingers and feelings. Children waited eagerly, faces glowing pink from the heat, their breath fogging up the mugs before the first sip. Sometimes a dash of cinnamon or a drop of vanilla was added, making each batch its own small masterpiece. It was a ritual as much as a recipe, a way to show care in the simplest form. Hot cocoa like that didn't just warm the body, it reminded you that home was right here. Fried green tomato. Po' boys turned unripe tomatoes into a sandwich that tasted like pure coastal sunshine wrapped in crunchy cornmeal. Thick slices of firm green tomatoes were dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried until their edges crisped and their centers softened just enough to release a bright tang. Piled high on soft French bread with a smear of remoulade and a handful of shredded lettuce, they became a favorite along Gulf Coast streets where shrimp boats docked and music floated from open windows. Vendors often sold them at fish fries and fairs when seafood prices climbed too high, proving that a garden vegetable could carry the day as well as any oyster or crab. Families remembered the scent of hot oil and the pop of cornmeal batter while waiting in line for a sandwich that blended thrift and celebration. Today, fast food counters try to imitate the flavor, but they cannot capture the quiet magic of fresh garden tomatoes picked before ripening, fried in backyard kitchens, and shared among neighbors who knew the value of every bite. Biscuits and chocolate gravy were childhood wonder poured straight from the pan. Grandparents stirred cocoa, milk, sugar, and flour together until it thickened into glossy sweetness. The smell was deep and rich, filling the kitchen like happiness itself. Hot biscuits came out of the oven, soft and split open, waiting for that warm chocolate flood. The gravy dripped down their sides, catching in cracks like treasure. Kids' eyes lit up. It was rare, a holiday gift made from humble ingredients. Sweet but not too rich, it tasted like joy and tenderness in every bite. Families gathered close, laughing and licking fingers, the sound of spoons scraping bowls like a song. For many, chocolate gravy wasn't just food. It was Christmas magic, fleeting and unforgettable. It was a reminder that the best gifts didn't come wrapped, but simmered slow on the stove, meant to be shared.
Number 17, smoked sausage and rice. A link of smoked pork sausage, split down the middle, fried flat, and served over white rice with a little of the rendered fat spoon on top. The World Health Organization classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as cigarettes. That classification sent families running from smoked sausage, bacon, and every cured meat that had ever touched a breakfast plate. The classification measured hazard, not dose. A link of smoked sausage at breakfast a few times a week is not the same exposure as a factory diet of processed meat at every meal. The protein and fat kept hunger away for hours. The rice was a blank canvas that absorbed the smoky drippings and turned a small piece of meat into a full plate.
Okra and tomato breakfast, hash turned garden vegetables into a colorful and hearty start to the day. Fresh okra was sliced into thin rounds and sautéed with ripe tomatoes, onions, and a pinch of black pepper until everything softened into a rich medley. The okra released its natural thickness, giving the dish a gentle stew-like consistency while still holding tender bites of vegetable. Served with hot cornbread or spooned over leftover rice, it offered both warmth and nourishment without requiring expensive ingredients. Grandparents remember gathering these vegetables from backyard plots at dawn, the dew still on the leaves as the skillet heated on the stove. The sweet acidity of tomatoes paired beautifully with the earthy flavor of okra, creating a combination that filled kitchens with a scent both bright and comforting. This breakfast hash celebrated the rhythm of the seasons and the importance of using what the garden gave, turning simple produce into a meal that lingered in memory long after the last bite. Molasses milk was one of those simple breakfast drinks that could fill an empty stomach and give strength to start the day without costing much. A mug of warm milk would be stirred with a generous spoon of blackstrap molasses until it turned dark, thick, and sweet, creating a drink unlike anything else. For families without access to expensive sugar, molasses was a cheaper and more nutritious option, packed with iron, calcium, and minerals that were badly needed in homes stretched thin. Children often drank it before school, while adults relied on it as a quick energy boost before heading to work in fields, factories, or other labor. It was easy to prepare, affordable, and comforting on cold mornings when heavier meals were not always possible or practical. The taste was bold, with a deep sweetness that lingered, giving a sense of fullness and warmth that plain milk never offered. It was more than a drink. It was a way of stretching resources while caring for a family's needs with love and creativity. Today it has disappeared from most tables, but it once stood proudly as a daily ritual of comfort.
Number 16, smothered potatoes with onions. 3 potatoes, 1 onion, a tablespoon of lard, salt and pepper, a skillet, and a lid. You sliced everything thin and fried it together with the lid on until the potatoes turned soft and golden and the onions dissolved into a sweet, sticky tangle. The lid trapped steam and turned the skillet into a little oven. 15 minutes, and it fed 2 people generously or 3 adequately. Potatoes cost 6 cents a pound. Onions were a nickel. Total cost, less than 20 cents. In households across the south side of Chicago and the west end of Louisville, smothered potatoes appeared every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday and Thursday were grits. Weekend was biscuits. That rotation lasted years in families where the budget never changed. Here's what that meant. Number 19, smothered onions on toast. When there was no meat at all, a skillet of slow smothered onions over day-old bread was breakfast. 2 large yellow onions went into the pan with a spoon of saved drippings, and the heat stayed low for almost 20 minutes. The onions cooked down to a soft brown jam that smelled like supper instead of sacrifice. 2 slices of bread, toasted dry in the oven, got covered with the warm onions and eaten with a fork. It was the kind of breakfast nobody bragged about, but it kept the body going on a morning when the icebox was almost empty.
Fried mullet with hush puppies brought the flavor of coastal mornings to inland tables, celebrating the bounty of southern waters. Fresh mullet fillets were seasoned and lightly dredged in cornmeal before being fried to a crisp golden finish, their mild flesh staying tender and flaky. Alongside the fish, cornmeal hush puppies sizzled in the same hot oil, forming round fritters with a crunchy crust and soft, savory interior. The combination delivered a contrast of textures and tastes that spoke of seaside breakfasts and family gatherings. Some cooks added chopped onions or jalapenos to the hush puppies for an extra kick, while others served lemon wedges to brighten the fish. This meal reminded families of fishing trips, coastal traditions, and the joy of bringing fresh catch straight from net to skillet. Fried mullet with hush puppies honored African-American ties to coastal communities and the creative spirit of cooks who turned fresh seafood and simple cornmeal into a feast worth waking up early for.
Number 23, sop and syrup. This was ribbon cane, syrup, and butter melted together in a saucer until they turned into something halfway between a sauce and a confession. You tore a biscuit in half, pressed the soft side into the pool, and ate it before it dripped. Some families used sorghum instead. Some used blackstrap molasses, but the method was the same. There was no recipe. You watched someone do it, and then you did it yourself. Children fought over the last swipe of the saucer. It was dessert and breakfast, and comfort rolled into one. The sugar industry would later spend billions trying to replicate what a grandmother could make with 2 ingredients in 30 seconds. Potted meat sandwiches provided affordable protein when fresh meat remained far beyond the family budget. These small tins of processed meat paste cost only nickels and could feed multiple children when spread thin across bread. The paste was salty and intensely flavored, meaning a little went far in making plain bread taste substantial. Mothers would open a single tin and divide it among several sandwiches, stretching resources while ensuring everyone ate before school or work. Potted meat required no refrigeration before opening, ideal for pantries without ice boxes. The flavor was not gourmet, but hunger made it taste like provision and care. Children learned to appreciate what their families could provide. Factory workers carried these in metal pails, eating them cold at work sites where no heating was possible.
Sorghum syrup. Waffles filled kitchens with the warm scent of toasted grain and caramel sweetness, creating a breakfast that tasted like a weekend celebration. Batter made with fresh eggs and rich milk cooked in cast iron waffle irons until crisp and golden, ready to catch every drop of thick sorghum syrup. This dark, earthy sweetener offered a depth of flavor beyond ordinary maple, with notes of molasses and a hint of smoke from the cane fields. Families in the South prized sorghum for its nutritional value and natural richness, making it a treasured pantry staple. Some cooks whipped a little butter into the syrup for a glossy glaze, while others drizzled it straight from the jar, letting the bold taste speak for itself. Sorghum syrup waffles reflected African-American culinary heritage and the ability to elevate basic ingredients into something memorable, creating a breakfast that lingered in both flavor and memory. Every crunchy bite, followed by sticky sweetness, felt like a slow morning worth savoring. Butter sugar toast was the quick, sweet breakfast many children rushed toward before school, made from nothing more than bread, butter, and a sprinkle of sugar. Grandparents spread the butter all the way to the edges, making sure every bite would melt just right. The toast warmed the sugar until it softened slightly, creating a delicate crunch that felt almost like a treat. It was simple, fast, and inexpensive, yet it tasted like something far more indulgent. For many children, this was the breakfast they could hold in one hand while tying their shoes with the other. It tasted like busy mornings, like running out the door with crumbs on your shirt, like the gentle love of someone who wanted you fed. Even when there was no time, butter sugar toast may be overlooked today, but the memory of it still lingers for anyone who grew up on its warm sweetness. Turtle soup breakfast bowls were a dish born of necessity, reflecting the creativity of African-American cooks during lean times. When turtles were available from local rivers or swamps, they were cleaned, simmered, and stewed into a thick soup. Vegetables and spices were added when possible, stretching the meat into a filling broth. The soup was often eaten in the morning, served hot in bowls that provided both comfort and strength. Turtle meat was valued for its richness, and the dish became a way to turn scarce resources into a sustaining meal. Though unusual by modern standards, it was once respected as a practical and nourishing option. Families relied on it when other proteins were out of reach, making it a reminder of both hardship and resilience. Turtle soup breakfast bowls showed how communities survived by making use of every resource available. Ham hock hash with potatoes was the quiet masterpiece of thrift, proof that waste had no place in a smart kitchen. The ham hocks, smoky and tender, were chopped into tiny pieces, their bits of meat still rich with flavor. They met diced potatoes and onions in a hot skillet, sizzling until golden brown and crisp. The smell was irresistible, earthy, savory, and just a little sweet from the caramelized onions. The sound of it frying was music to the morning, a reminder that even scraps could become something special. Every family had their own rhythm for making it. Some used the drippings from the ham, others added peppers or leftover gravy to stretch it further. Served hot, often with a fried egg perched on top, it was filling enough to keep hunger away all day. In every bite lived the story of survival and skill, of families who turned hardship into heritage. It wasn't just breakfast, it was pride on a plate. Ham bone soup with vegetables was one of those meals where one piece of meat flavored an entire pot. A single ham bone, stripped of most of its meat, simmered for hours with onions, carrots, and potatoes until the broth turned rich and smoky. My grandmother would add beans or greens if she had them, letting the flavors meld into something far more substantial than the ingredients suggested. Families gathered around steaming bowls, dipping bread into the broth and savoring the flavor the bone had left behind. It was frugal cooking at its finest, taking scraps and stretching them into nourishment. The soup fed many mouths, warmed cold nights, and made do with what was available. In the 1960s, when meat was costly, a ham bone could be the centerpiece of dinner, proving that thrift and patience could coax flavor out of nearly anything. Ham bone soup with vegetables carried both practicality and comfort in every ladleful. Themed matching outfits turned living rooms into makeshift photo studios every Christmas. Families dressed in coordinated reds, greens, or golds, some handmade, others thrifted, but always perfect in spirit. Mothers often sewed late into the night, pinning hems and adjusting collars so everyone looked their best. Fathers would pretend to fuss about the matching sweaters, but when the camera flashed, they smiled the widest. The youngest kids wore ribbons or bow ties too big for their necks, and older siblings teased but secretly loved the attention. The flashbulb lit up faces full of laughter, the sound of soul music echoing in the background. Afterward, the family crowded around the Polaroid, waving it dry, waiting for the image to appear like magic. Matching outfits weren't about perfection. They were a family's way of saying, "We're together, we're proud, and we made it through another year." Those snapshots, imperfect and glowing, still hang in homes today. The stove is still there in most of those kitchens. The skillets, too. What left was the person who stood at them every morning without a second thought, because feeding the house before sunrise was just what you did. If any of these breakfasts brought somebody back to your table, leave their name in the comments. Share this with someone who remembers the smell. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time.